Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so a couple years ago, I was in Estes Park, Colorado. I'm a wildlife photographer, so I was actually there looking for elk to photograph. And I've always just been fascinated with all this paranormal stuff. I love watching ghost shows. I love watching Sam and Colby on YouTube. It's all so fascinating to me, even though I've never had a paranormal experience up till this moment. It just was very fascinating to me. So because of that, I wanted to stay in the Stanley Hotel, which is in Estes Park and is notoriously one of the most haunted hotels in the world. Sam and Colby have done multiple videos there and have captured some pretty crazy stuff. Anyways, I even decided to buy one of those little spirit boxes to see if I could communicate with anything while I was there. So I roll up to the Stanley, I get my room, and then I go back into my truck, got some dinner, and I drove back and was sitting in the parking lot of the Stanley, and I was FaceTiming my sister at this moment. And I was like, hey, should I open this spirit box up and try it out in the parking lot here? And we're like, yeah, sure, why not? So I opened the spirit box, start asking questions for probably 10 minutes, not a single thing, no response whatsoever. So I was like, okay, this is kind of dumb. But I was like, why don't I take it up to the room, see if I get anything there? So I go into my hotel room, which is very eerie, by the way. They've got all these pictures of like really old-timey photos of creepy old people standing there. You know how it is. And I'm still FaceTiming my sister, and I asked all kinds of questions while I was in the hotel room for probably another 10 minutes. Again, no response. So I say to my sister, I go, well, it clearly doesn't like me, so why don't you ask it a question? And I kid you not, clear as day, the spirit box goes, no, you ask it something. Like in like a sassy voice. I'm dead serious. It hadn't said anything this entire time until I say to my sister, you ask it a question, and it was almost like I was talking to some dude on the phone. It sounded that clear. It says, no, you ask it something. And I freaked out. I turned the spirit box off. My sister started freaking out over the phone. And to this day, I just can't explain it. You know, I can't really debunk it. I'm a very rational person. So I've tried, and I've even taken apart the spirit box, and it's just a normally wired like radio device. So anyways, it was quite the creepy night that night staying there alone. I slept with the lights on. But yeah, that's my story. So pretty weird stuff.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go.
So when I was a kid, about 9 or 10 years old, for a week straight, you know, every day for a week, I had two of my cousins would come over to the house. And the oldest was my age, and then, you know, she had a sister who was a couple years younger. Our dads worked together, so, you know, they would come to the house in the morning. Our dads would go to work. We would chill all day long. And my grandma was there at the time, which is my dad's mom. She was there, so, you know, she looked after us or whatever. Well, I had a movie, the Blair Witch Project, the original Blair Witch Project, you know, 1999 movie, had it on VHS. And don't ask me why, but every day for that whole week, my cousins would come over and we would put the movie in the morning. You know, we put it in. As soon as it was over, we would rewind it and watch it again. We watched this movie all day, every day for a week straight until I think it was like the last day or on a Friday or whatever. You know, they come over again. We watch it all day long. They go home at the end of the day. And that night was a pretty interesting night. I remember being in my room watching TV. My dad's in the shower or whatever. And remind you, my grandma is in town, and she's sleeping in my dad's room. She's sleeping in my dad's room in his bed or whatever. So my dad's, you know, bunking with me. My dad finishes his shower. He comes in, lays down, goes to sleep. And then I decide to, you know, I'm going to go ahead and lay down and go to sleep. Well, as I'm laying there, you know, trying to go to sleep, you know, we had the ceiling fan on, and you know how like the ceiling fan, when the fan is on, you know, you hear it, you can hear it on, like it makes like the buzzing noise or whatever, like you can hear it that it's on. Well, as I'm laying there trying to go to sleep, I close my eyes and I can hear the fan, like the buzzing. I can hear it, but it's like progressively getting louder. It gets louder and louder. And then I open my eyes, like, what the hell? I open my eyes and it's normal. It goes back to normal. Close my eyes, gets loud, open, normal. For a few minutes or so, like, it's doing that. So finally, I open my eyes and I look over the sheet, look over the blanket at the doorway of my room, and I see what looks like my grandma, which is my dad's mom, which, mind again, she's there at the house in the room next door, in the room, you know, right next to my room, in my dad's room, asleep. But I'm seeing her standing in the doorway of my room, and I remember she's wearing like an all white, like a nightgown, like just all white, long sleeve, all white nightgown, standing in the doorway. So I'm laying there and she's, you know, she's staring at me and I'm just laying there. I freak the hell out. I turn around, wake up my dad, like, Dad, you know, like, there's somebody at the door. Like, you know, sometimes I'm hearing noises, I'm seeing shit, you know, like, wake the hell up. Dad wakes up, he's like, what's the matter, son? Whatever. I'm like, dude, there's some shit going on, bro. He tries his best to comfort me. And, you know, I eventually fall asleep. I go to sleep, you know, so. But the next day, my cousins come over. And before I could even say anything about watching that movie, they both told me, we don't want to watch that movie. And so I'm like, okay, well, why not? You know, I don't want to watch it either, but why don't y'all want to watch it? You know what I'm saying? They told me that the night before, which is the same night that I had my experience, they also had an experience. They said that they were, because they sleep in the same room, across town, mind you, across town, they were asleep, middle of the night, they were asleep, and outside their window or outside the house, you know, on the street, there's the telephone pole with the orange light, you know what I'm saying? And it's beaming right through their window, of course. They're asleep and they both wake up and they both look out the window, not out the window, but they just look towards the window. And they said that they both see this, like an outline of like a man or some, like a person standing outside of their window. Like they can see the outline, like his shadow. They can see him standing out there. And they're telling me this, and I'm just like, what the f-? So yeah, needless, you know, next day, next night, whatever, before bedtime, you know, my grandma comes into my room and she gets, you know, the little egg and she's rubbing it on my face and throughout my body, you know, and then she cracks it in the thing. And I don't remember what it looked like, but yeah, so that's my ghost story, you know. So those of you, you know, there's people that believe that, you know, horror movies or whatever open up portals. I don't necessarily believe that, but I think it's possible. And I think that it's very much possible that we opened a portal or what, but it was crazy. But yeah, like I said, you know, I'm 32 years old. I was like 9 or 10 at the time, but I remember that shit like it was yesterday. I'll never forget that.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
I have two big ones that have personally happened to me. One of them is super scary. The other one is nice, and I'm going to tell you the nice one first. Okay, so to preface this, spooky things have always happened to my stepmom, and 99% of the unexplainable things that have happened to me have also been in her presence. She's just one of those, like, magnets for this type of thing. So my stepmom's best friend from childhood passed away when they were in their early 20s. Later, my little brother, my stepmom's son, was born on the birthday of this particular friend. And my brother was born with like 4 concurrent congenital heart conditions. So his whole early life, first couple of years of life, he was in and out of the hospital, having heart surgery, cath labs, all that kind of stuff. On Valentine's Day one year, my father got my stepmom just like this crappy stuffed heart from like a gas station. And when you pressed on the heart's hand, it would play this song, and the song was like do 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 do, if you know it. And they started having this thing happen where pretty much every year on my brother's birthday, also the friend's birthday, or Christmas, or anytime my brother was going to have kind of a big procedure done in the hospital, this heart would go off by itself. And it like didn't need to have batteries. Like just randomly you would hear the do 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 when something big was going on, particularly around my brother, birthday twins. So I knew about the heart. I knew that this would happen sometimes. Spooky, but nice, right? Because it's assumed to be the best friend. Who wouldn't love that? That's nice. One day, me and my stepmom are home alone, and we're just sitting downstairs, sort of folding laundry or something, just talking. And she's telling me about this dream she had about her best friend one night. And there were a lot of unanswered questions kind of around this particular friend's death. And, you know, my stepmom was really missing her one night. My father has night terrors, so he'll often kind of like go sleep on the couch if he's having a bad night so he doesn't disturb my stepmom, and he'll always close the bedroom door behind him. In this particular dream, my stepmom dreamt that the door was closed, my father wasn't there, and her friend comes in the door, kind of like gets into bed with her, and they just talk. And she told me that this felt so real that her friend answered all the questions that she had surrounding her death. They got to express how much they missed each other, and it was just really like calming and soothing for her to have that sort of final conversation with her friend. She wakes up the next morning from this dream and the door is open, as if in the dream her friend had opened the door. So she's telling me this really like meaningful dream she had with her friend, and we're both folding laundry, and she pauses in the middle of laundry and she goes, "Wait, hold on." And from upstairs in the nursery where that heart is, as we're talking about this friend, we both hear do 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 do. It sent chills down my spine because we were talking about her. She knew we were talking about her. This thing went off, and it was just a sign of like, I know you're talking about me. I'm here. However, I was 16 and like a scaredy cat, and I was sleeping in the room where the heart was. So I walked in later and I was like, hi, please don't do anything while I'm here. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Okay, I'm sorry. Work has been crazy. I will tell you guys my scary ghost story now. I tried to record this. It got way too long, so I'm gonna try. Okay, I grew up in Washington. My other set of parents, my father and stepmom, live outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. So I would go stay with them like once or twice a year, let's say. This particular time, they had just moved to a new house, and I was very excited because their last house was a dark place. Scary. I have stories about that house that I will not share here, but let's just say that I was super relieved that they were not there anymore. I was excited. So picture it, summer, 17, I'm going to stay with my other family. I'm like, oh, creepy things won't happen anymore. That's great. Little did I know. Okay, quick layout. Bottom floor, all the living area, set of stairs, very small landing, and all the bedrooms are clustered around this landing. On this particular night, everyone goes to bed before me, let's say at like 10. Parents in one room with my baby brother, my other little brother who's like 12 at the time in the other room, and then the nursery, which is where I'm sleeping. Okay, so it's like midnight, I'm awake, I'm 17, I'm reading a book. I had just gone to the bathroom, so I knew for a fact everyone was upstairs because they all sleep with their doors open. The landing is super small, so I saw all of them a moment ago. They were all fully asleep in their beds. So I'm minding my own business, reading, and from the bottom of the stairs, I hear something. And it's footsteps on the stairs. And it sounded like a little kid almost, like, you know how little kids just like kind of barrel up and down the stairs, like do 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 do. Yeah. Stops at the top of the stairs. I'm like, what the is this? I hear it go back down. Do, 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 do. This continues to happen. I hear it multiple times. Do, 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 do. My grandma was very spooky and kooky, and she always told me if anything paranormal happened to ignore it, because if you pay attention, you'll like feed into the energy and it will get more aggressive and stronger or something. So this is in my head and I'm like, I'm ignoring this. Nothing's happening. Everything's fine. And again, stuff had happened at their last house and I was just like, not again. So I'm ignoring it because it's gonna stop, right? At this point, I have like a headphone in, volume very low, pretending I'm not listening to the running up and down the stairs. I hear it come back up. Do, 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 do. It stops. Stops for a few minutes. I'm like, okay, maybe it's done. Let's say 5 minutes passed after this thing had stopped at the top of the stairs. Again, the landing is small, so let's say hypothetically, wherever this thing stopped is like 3 feet from my closed door. After a few minutes, I'm sure everything is all good. I kind of relax and I'm still reading my book. And then suddenly, it was like a full-grown man, like a 6 foot tall man, took both of his fists and slammed it way harder than that. Slammed it against the door of the room I was sleeping in. The door shook. I jump up. If there's fight and flight, there's also freeze. And I fucking froze. I was so scared. But again, my grandma's wisdom, I'm like, I have to ignore it. Nothing happened. 2 minutes later, again, harder. And the vibe was genuinely like, don't ignore me. That was like the vibe I got from the second slam. A couple minutes go by, I haven't moved. But I'm like, what do I do? I decide to take action. I take my blanket, wrap it around my body for protection. Flip on my bedroom light. I swing open the door to meet my fate. The landing is empty. Everyone is sleeping, obviously. I flip on the hallway light, flip off my light. Flip on my brother's light, flip off the hallway light. Close his door, shake him half awake, and I'm like, scoot over, I'm sleeping in here. I'm 17, he's 12. We haven't shared a bed in several years, but that's how scared I was. It is summer in Nevada, and I literally have the covers over my face like this, and I'm like breathing in my own carbon dioxide, but I was like, I have to have the covers over my face. After like 15 minutes on his door, again, softer, but kind of like a, I know you're still in there. I was like, thank God I'm going home tomorrow. Anyway, this started happening to them after I left. This would happen on my brother's door, the slamming. From downstairs, they would also start hearing like muffled arguments at the landing, like voices fighting. Anyway, they moved out of that house as quickly as possible because it was super scary. I don't know if this was like an actual ghost. I don't know if this was like residual energy from like a bad DV type of thing going on in that house previously, but I did not like it. And yeah, that's it. Sorry this was super long. You guys are some ghost story fiends, but that's okay. Me too. I got some comments on my other videos of like, oh, of course you have ghost stories because you believe in ghosts, blah, blah, blah. I want you to know I am not seeking this out. This is not something that happens to me all the time. In fact, nothing has happened to me in like 12 or 13 years. On paper, I'm a very credible person. But all I'm saying is like, if I were making it up, I think I would project this onto a lot more stuff in my life. And like, this is all very isolated. Okay, so story one from the old house. It was the first time that I was going to stay there. Me and my brother are hanging out in the living room by ourselves. And he goes, you know, this house is haunted, right? And I'm like, shut up. Don't tell me anything. Shut up. But he's my little brother, so he's a dick. So he starts telling me like all the stuff that happens in this house. And it is just like a barrage of activity constantly. Like, you might not find these stories as scary as some of my other ones, but for my family, like, we reflect on that house and think of it as like the truly scary house because of how often things were happening. Anyway, he's telling me about how the house is haunted. I'm like trying not to listen to him, but then we hear a noise. And my father's house is decked out in like Raiders stuff at this time. He's like, he's a California boy, OG Raiders fan, not just because they're in Vegas now. but like there's like a Raiders tin above the front door that's like one of those tins you'd see in a bar that's decorative. It's like a football helmet and the Raiders logo, and it starts just like vibrating on the wall like da 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 da. I wonder if I have something that can mimic it. Okay, I'm at my husband's art desk, and here's a metal thing. So it's a metal thing on the wall like this, and it starts like really fast. And it goes on for like a minute or two, so it's not just like a big truck going by or something, you know, which is what my explanation would be. It went on for a little too long. Okay, story 2, the radio. Okay, so the way that this house is laid out is the primary bedroom is like all on one side of the house, and then the other bedrooms are all the way on the other side of the house. So it's like the nursery and my brother's room. And when I would come stay, me and my brother would like have like sleepover time. Like we would be in the nursery with like blankets on the floor, just gossiping. So he falls asleep. His bedroom is down the hallway and weird stuff happen in there all the time. He has like a very 2000s style stereo, like one of the ones with the volume knob that you have to manually rotate to turn up and down the volume. And I'm the only one awake, of course. And I hear his radio turn on from his room, and the volume turns up all the way. All the way. It was so loud. Turns down, turns back up, turns down. And it wasn't like, there wasn't rhyme or reason to the frequency, because if it was like the same amount of time or pattern, I'd be like, oh, it's like bugging out or whatever. It was like, it would stay loud sometimes for a second. Sometimes it would stay loud longer. I don't know. There was no pattern. So that probably happens like 6 times, and then the radio just turns off while it's at like almost full volume. I was like, I hate it here. Okay, story 3, the cabinets. This one was in the middle of the day, and I have the bathroom door locked because I'm taking a shower. My worst fear is stuff happening while I'm in the shower. I'm so vulnerable. I'm shampooing my hair, and I hear like like tapping on the wall. I look out of the shower. Every single cabinet door in the bathroom has swung open. Every single one. Freaked me out. I also have shampoo in my hair. I'm like, not today. So I finish shampooing, water running and shampoo running down my face, like into my fucking eyes. Cause I'm like, you're not gonna sneak up on me. Okay, story 4, the cat. My stepmom was cat sitting for her best friend, and this was like the world's most ancient cat, I swear to God. It was so old. The entire time, which was like almost a week, that cat just stayed in the bathroom in front of the vents, which is word. Like, it is Nevada, it's hot, like, me too. Its food was in there, the litter box was in there. It did not leave. I cannot emphasize this enough. It did not leave that room the entire time. Until one night, I decide I'm going to sleep on the couch. This was after the radio incident, so I was scared. So I was watching TV because I was scared, and turn it off, decide I'm like going to go to sleep now. When the cat, for the first time in days, walks out. It's 3 a.m., by the way. That's important to know. Walks out, stands directly in front of me, stares at me, and just starts meowing persistently. Like yowls as well, like meow, meow. I was like, what? Stop. So I was hoping the cat just decided randomly it wanted to like be pet or something. So I go to like pet it, hoping that's what it wants, and it shirks away from me. And just after it shirks away, it looks above my head, and it's following something like that. And I'm like, nope. Covers over my head, waiting, and then the cat just walks back into the bathroom, doesn't leave again for the entire rest of the time my stepmom's cat sitting. All right, the final story I will tell about that house is secondhand. So my brother would wake up sometimes and he would see a man in a hat like standing at the end of the bed. Super scary. I've never seen anything. I hope to God I never do. But one night he wakes up, nothing's there. but he can feel his blanket, like, hold on, I'll do this with my kafia. He feels his blanket like being pulled off of him like this, and so he panics and he like grabs it back up to him, right? And just after he does that, something pulls it all the way off. It flies off the bed, hits the wall, like flies all the way off of him. And I'm pretty sure he like went and woke up my parents and like slept in there or something. It was scary. I've spoken to 3 different people who have lived on that same road who also had really scary things happen in their house. So like something's up over there. If you live on Tiger Lily Way in Henderson, Nevada, something is wrong. My stepmom is also like really in tune at the time with like whatever is going on with her. And she would like see things, particularly in the archway of between like the living room and kitchen. There's like a little archway, and she would see things like pass between it all the time. She would see the man in the hat like in the hallway, crossing by the archway, like all kinds of stuff. That's kind of when she decided to like shut down her brain to those types of things. And now nothing has happened. In the house that they've been in for over 10 years, nothing's wrong, which is great. Anyway, those are all the ones that are more or less like firsthand for me. You know, I've heard other things from other people in my family, but we'll leave it at that.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, I'm gonna try really hard to summarize this because I could literally talk about this forever. I'm gonna tell you guys my dad's story because I have my own that I think is really, really freaky, but his is like another level. When my dad was a teenager, he was a little more on the rebellious side, and my grandma was very, very religious. She always has been. And so when his friend came over with a Ouija board and said, "Do you want to do this?" He was like, "Okay, sure." I think also at the time people were more acute to believe that Ouija boards weren't real because we didn't have the internet and we weren't able to hear people's stories about this. So it's my dad, my dad's friend, and my dad's brother, so my uncle. They all decide to do it together because they're all friends. They sit down, they open the board, and they have the spirit come through. It's a girl, she says she's a pilgrim, I don't remember the name, and they talk to her, and it's fine, they have a good experience. So because they had a good experience and it was fun, they did it again and again. They did it about 2 or 3 times. Everything was fine every single time until the last time they ever used it. The last time they ever used a Ouija board, they sat down and they were talking to this one specific spirit. Again, she's the only one that they ever talked to. While they're talking to her, she's in the middle of spelling something out, the board stops, and the pattern, the way it starts to move starts to change. So pretty immediately they could tell that it's not her anymore, there's something else there, and they're kind of confused, so they ask, "Is someone else here?" The board moves to yes, and they're like, "Okay, who are you?" And it starts to spell out a name. I'm not going to say the name because I believe names have power and it genuinely scares me, but I will fingerspell it. Okay, it's pretty easy to figure out who this is, you'll see. And the way that the board is moving now is different. It's ominous. It like has a negative energy to it. So they ask the person or whoever, they ask the spirit, "What do you want? Like, why are you here? Why did you get rid of the other spirit?" The board starts to spell out over and over again, "I want to kill you. I want to kill you." Over and over. So this is enough for them. They close out the board, they don't talk about it, they never use it again, they don't touch it. But obviously this experience stuck with my dad. It's scary. So when he became an adult and Google had just kind of become a thing, he decides to Google it and see if there's any information about this spirit. Nothing comes up. There's not much on Google at this point, so he's like, "Oh, okay, whatever." A couple years later, once it's a little bit more established, he Googles again, and there's a little bit more information. Other people are talking about this and the experiences that they've had, and he's like, "Oh, that's really weird." And then when the internet becomes fully established, YouTube's a thing, Reddit's a thing, it's there. He Googles it a 3rd time. And at this point, there's a full-length feature film about it, YouTube videos, Reddit threads, like thousands of people talking about how they've had an experience with this one specific spirit. That's why I said it's really easy to figure out who this is if you actually want to. I wouldn't really recommend, I don't. So of course this terrifies him. He's like, "Oh my god, like that's crazy." And I 100% believe my dad because I grew up hearing the story before the internet was a really established thing, so I know he's not making it up. So yeah, I definitely have a handful of my own to tell, but that is my dad's.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so this is my scary story. I shared my dad's, but this is one that happened to me, and I just feel like nobody like ever believes me, but it's okay because I know that it happened, like I was there. Okay, so my house got broken into when I was in 6th grade by an actual person while we were all sleeping in the house. So like I have a lot of fear around home invasions. So when I was older, like 16 or 17, my parents had decided to go out of town for the weekend, my whole family, and I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay and hang out with my friends. So my parents were like, "You're responsible. We have 2 big dogs." They felt safe leaving me home alone. So that day I had spent the entire day at my friend's house. She had dogs, so I brought my dogs over there. It was a play date. We hung out there till like 11 o'clock at night. I decided it's time to go home because my dogs couldn't spend the night there. So I was like, we're gonna go back to the house. I get to the house and I realized I had left the door unlocked, which one is very unlike me, but it just set me so much on edge. I was like, oh, like that's ew. So I go through the entire house and make sure no one's there. I have my dogs sniff every room and corner, and like they would alert me if someone was there. So I felt confident that no one was in the house. Because of what happened when I was in 6th grade, I have a very exact routine when I'm going to sleep. I close every single door, turn off every light, lock every window, lock every door. I make sure I triple check. And so I'm going around, I'm turning off all the lights, closing all the doors. I get to my parents' room and I think, oh, it would be so freaky if I like woke up and this was on. And then immediately I'm like, no, don't think that, like intrusive thought, right? So I go to bed, I lock myself in my room because obviously like you're a 16-year-old, you're a little freaked out being home alone. And then I wake up at 3 a.m. I know because I checked my phone, to my dog barking like crazy. And I wasn't immediately freaked out because she does that sometimes when she has to go to the restroom or something. So I'm like, oh, she has to go out. I get up and I open my door. My parents' room is directly across from mine. My room, my parents' room. I open my door and my parents' bedroom, it like gives me chills, is wide open and the light is all the way on. And they had a specific sliding light, and if you have one of those, you know you have to slide it, but you can also click it on and off on the bottom. So I had clicked it off and slid it down. So someone had opened the door, clicked on the light, and slid it all the way up. My first thought isn't ghost, it's home invasion, right? So I close the door, I start having a panic attack, like actually freaking out. I text my mom because I'm too scared to call, and mom instincts kick in or something, and she wakes up. She calls the police. The police come. They don't do anything, actually. They don't check the house at all. And so I call my mom back, and we go through the entire house together. I let the dogs out. They don't react to anything. All the doors are locked. All the windows are locked. Everything's normal. And so I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do, I guess. So I get the dogs. I put them in my room. I lock the door. I go to sleep. Everything's fine. The next morning, my dad calls me. He says, I didn't want to scare you last night because I knew you were already freaked out, but like some really weird stuff has been happening this entire week because he was home by himself that entire week before. And he said that things were falling off the walls. He kept hearing voices in other rooms. And that house had some weird stuff happen there before. Like it had weird things happen. And so I was convinced that I had just experienced a haunting in some capacity. So my dad is very Catholic, and he gets holy water and he blesses every single doorway when he gets home, and nothing scary happened after that, but it was really terrifying for me. So since so many people liked this video, I wanted to tell you guys some shorter stories I have. They're also about Ouija boards, but they're just really short ones. So I told a story about my dad, but my mom also used to have one, and at this point in her life she became Christian and she didn't want it anywhere near her anymore. She wanted it gone. She decided to throw it away, but she didn't want to throw it away at the house because she didn't even want it in her house anymore. So she put it in the trunk of her car so she could just toss it in a dumpster. The day that she put it in her car, she got in an awful car accident. She totaled her car. She could have been seriously injured, and she wasn't. She was okay. But to this day, she still attributes it to the Ouija board being in her car and her trying to get rid of it. My tia also used to have one, and when she figured out she didn't want it anymore, she tried really hard to throw it away and get rid of it, and it kept coming back. She said she tried to throw it away, she tried to give it away, no matter what she did, it would always end up back at her apartment. Eventually, she got so scared she burned it, and then it stopped after that. It didn't come back. But she said she also remembers vividly smelling cigarette smoke, seeing cigarette butts, and finding cigarette burns on her stuff in her apartment, but she didn't smoke, and no one else she knew smoked. I personally have never done a Ouija board. I don't think I ever will. I think that stuff's real and scary. It freaks me out. I don't want to open doors. I know not everyone thinks that. Some people think it's like stupid, but I really think a lot of people don't believe in that stuff until it happens to them. But personally, I do. So, okay.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable, but is entirely.
I don't think I'll ever run out of stories to tell. I have so many, but while this is turning, I want to tell you guys this one. I already have 2 of these posted if you guys want to watch those, and this is kind of an extension of the second one. In the second video, I was talking about my experience growing up in my childhood home and how I had something kind of freaky like happen to me there. And honestly, I think that was probably the most intense thing that ever happened. But yesterday I was talking to my dad about that house, and I found out things that I didn't know at all growing up. So I always knew that the family who lived there before us had a disabled daughter. She was completely paralyzed. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. But I thought she was born that way. Apparently, my dad just informed me, they actually, one of the reasons they moved is because she had drowned in the pool in the backyard. And she didn't die, obviously, but it did enough damage to where it completely paralyzed her, and she basically had like locked-in syndrome or something like that. I don't know the exact diagnosis or what it was. So I was telling my dad about my experience and kind of just like reminding him everything that happened and being like, oh, wasn't that weird? And he told me that he could have sworn when we first moved to that house, he used to see a little girl all the time. And he said it would really freak him out, but he never mentioned it because like we had spent so much money on that house and there was nothing he could do. But he said that he would always wonder if like somehow part of her spirit had somehow gotten trapped there when she drowned. And then that reminded me of all these little weird things that used to happen periodically when we lived there. One of the biggest things is that I would just always see things in the corner of my eyes, so would my siblings, and I would always hear my name being whispered. But that's fairly normal. That happens to people a lot. But there were other things, like my brother swears that one time he was walking down the hallway and a backpack flew out of the room and hit him, and he thought it was my sister messing with him, but when he checked the room, nobody was in there. One time my brother and my sister made a fort in the living room, and he had been knocking like on the door to try and scare my sister, and then he was like, oh, just kidding, it's just me. And then once he said that, something started knocking back. And that's not the only time knocking has happened. My parents one time, I remember I woke up and they were all talking in hushed tones because they didn't want to scare me, but I was like, what's going on? And they told me in the middle of the night they heard someone knocking on their window. Enough to where my dad went out and searched the yard, but there was no one back there. One time we were all sitting in the living room together and we all heard a giant crash. I thought it was the dogs and they had knocked something over, so I yelled at them and I realized the dogs are sitting at my feet and nobody was back there. An entire bookshelf had somehow gotten knocked over. One time we had a family friend staying with us and he swore that in the middle of the night he got up to use the restroom and he saw my brother levitating in the middle of his room. That one sounds crazy, I know. That same friend also had really bad night terrors while they were staying with us. This one isn't necessarily paranormal, but it's just really freaky. One time we decided to go up into the attic to see what they had left there because the previous owners had left a bunch of stuff, and we found a bunch of really old, creepy porcelain dolls that they had left in the attic. There's definitely more stuff that I'm not thinking of right now, but yeah, just a lot of seeing and hearing things. And I know this sounds like a lot, and you're probably like, girl, why didn't you put that together sooner? But we lived there for 15 years, and this stuff all happened like very spaced out, so I think I never just really thought about it enough. But that's my haunted house story, I guess. Scary story time. Since so many people are loving the scary stories, I thought I would tell you guys another one that I actually just remembered when I was kind of reminiscing on the other stuff I told. This happened when I was probably in 5th grade. My parents got really heavily into ministry and wanting to do community outreach and stuff. And so I grew up in a really small town. I think it's important to reiterate that. It was very old, about 7,000 people. So the downtown area was just like a couple of old buildings. There's really not much down there. So they had rented out one of these older buildings downtown and they had turned it into this like worship coffee thing. So every weekend or whatever, we would stay open really late and people would come and pray and worship and have free coffee and all this stuff. So one night we were there and it was pretty late. I don't remember how late, but I remember it was really dark outside. So I would say maybe around like 9 or 10. And so my best friend at that time, her parents also went to that church. And so we were always hanging out when they were there. And they were there that night and we got bored and we were like, let's go play outside. So we go outside. Our parents are fine. They know we're outside because we're just right outside the building. And like I said, there's no one else downtown. It's like just empty. And so we stay where we can see everyone because there's big windows and we're just right in front. But I look across the street and I actually like get chills remembering it because it's just so weird. And I see this really tall, dark figure. And it doesn't look like a person. Like immediately I know it's not a person because it looks shadowy. But it's this tall, dark, skinny figure and it has a top hat. And it's walking down the street heading towards us. And immediately I get chills and I'm like, no, like I need to leave. But I don't want to say anything to my friend because I think I'm imagining it because I can tell it's not a person. So I'm like, hey, let's go inside. So she's like, immediately, yeah, let's go inside. Like she didn't argue with me at all, which I also thought was weird. And then when we got inside, I was like, hey, did you see that? Because I swear I just saw something and like that's what freaked me out. And she looks at me and she goes, yes, the guy with the top hat. And immediate chills everywhere. It was like, you saw him too? And we both couldn't believe what we saw because we both said that it didn't look like a person and it was so weird. It was so freaky and creepy. And part of me wonders if it had to do with how much like worship and stuff was going inside the building, if something like evil was lurking outside. It was just weird. Let's talk about the Hat Man. This is literally something I just found out about yesterday. I posted a spooky story time talking about how when I was younger, me and a friend both experienced this tall, dark shadow figure with a hat. I didn't realize that this is a phenomenon that a lot of people experience, so I did some research. The Hat Man is most often described as a tall, dark shadow figure wearing a trench coat and fedora. However, other people see him wearing different hats. I saw him in a top hat. Sometimes he's described as having glowing red eyes, and other people just see a dark face, which is what I saw. He's actually most often a sleep paralysis demon. People usually experience him when they're falling asleep or they are experiencing sleep paralysis or in their dreams. However, I saw him when I was wide awake, and that is a common thing too. However, sleep paralysis is more common. The lore is that he feeds on your fear. So he emits like an evil energy. You can feel that he's evil, which makes you afraid, and then he feeds on your fear. I saw a couple people say that they've seen him attack like once or twice. But usually the most common thing is that he just stands and watches, which I think is creepier. And then people usually say that he walks away. He doesn't just disappear, he walks away, which is exactly what I saw. One of the most interesting things I found, and I had someone comment this as well, is that he's more likely to appear to people who are going through something traumatic. I think it's because your emotions are just so skewed. But why that's so interesting is because me and the friend who saw it with me both at the same time had gone through something pretty traumatic together. So I just think it's crazy. I think it's so crazy that both of us experienced him together after going through something traumatic. I'm telling you, finding out that this is something that a lot of people have experienced made it so much scarier to me, because I'm like, I did not imagine that. If you or anyone else you know have Hatman stories, I would love to hear them. Please share them, because I think it's so genuinely freaky and scary, especially like a phenomenon like this where thousands of people have experienced it.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
When me and my sisters were in high school, we got our hands on a glow-in-the-dark Ouija board from Toys R Us and decided to use it in our house because we experienced weird things on occasion and we were sure there had to be a ghost or two. So we used the Ouija board. Nothing happens initially, but after using it, me and multiple other people in my family started to see shadow figures in the home. And it got to the point that I couldn't sleep in my bedroom at night anymore because the activity was bonkers. I would literally drag my twin-size mattress out to our living room and I would sleep out there at night because no one could stay in my room. So finally one night, one of my family members is like, hey, let me sleep in your room with you and see if I see anything. And that night I wake up to them screaming bloody murder. I look up, I see multiple shadow figures all standing in the room. And before I say anything, I look at them and I say, what did you see? And they said, Ivy, I saw them. It was crazy. So how that whole situation ended is that it didn't, and my parents' house is still super haunted to this day. Which for me, as a ghost hunter, is fantastic because it means every time I go and visit home, especially when I stay the night, I always bring some of my ghost hunting equipment with me and get to do little investigations. So in the end, that whole experience, as scary as it was at the time, it did turn myself and some of my other family members into paranormal fanatics who are now just really interested and fascinated by it all. I even collect Ouija boards and I still frequently use them to this day. And actually, not this weekend, but next weekend on the 11th, I will be probably staying the night at their house again, so maybe I'll try and film some stuff for TikTok. I'll definitely bring my pride and joy, my tripwire, because the spirits at my parents' house love this thing. And for people in the comments trying to warn me about Ouija boards, again, I have them all over the place. I love them.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so my name is Brandy Stark. I'm the founder of the Spirits of St. Petersburg, and I've been loving these Stitch stories. I have been doing paranormal investigations since 1997, and my team is the oldest in the Tampa Bay area. So we're in our 25th year as a team, which is incredible. Anyway, I wanted to tell one other story, because the best ones are always the ones that happen to you. I mean, understand that the world is not as paranormal as the TV shows make it out to be. But, I mean, I've seen my share. I've seen one person pushed. I've been touched on the shoulder and scratched once on the face. And I've seen a Bible come out and do this by itself. Pretty cool stuff. But it's still those personal stories that really get you. So, when I was 16, we moved from Lutz, Florida over to St. Petersburg, Florida for my mom's job. She worked at Florida Power at the time. And, I had kind of like an attached bedroom. So it was a converted garage, attached bedroom. And my mother was in the house, and this was not separated from the house, but it was like a further bedroom from her. So the first year that we were there, I had 3 visits from this faceless entity. Now understand, at the time I was trying to decide whether or not my part of the house was haunted, because we knew that there was a suicide on the property, and my bedroom had been originally a garage that kind of got enclosed and converted into this awesomely huge bedroom, which was great if you were a teenager, right? Made you feel like you were free. So what ended up happening was this would happen around 7 o'clock every morning, right around twilight. And I would wake up and I wouldn't be moving, but I would look down at the foot of my bed. And the first time I saw this thing, it looked like my mother. It was in her shape. It was literally wearing a night set that she had, like this really pretty white nightgown and robe that she actually did own. And it even had her glasses, but its skin color was pastel. And it had no face. That's the part I remember. And it was at the foot of the bed, and it's like it wanted to look at me at my face, and I was kind of on my side. And so the thing actually bent backwards and turned its neck up and over at the foot of the bed to kind of get a different view of me and I guess see my face. And that was weird. And then it just kind of disappeared and I went back to sleep. Then the second time it showed up, it was something similar, where it was once again wearing her clothes, and it had the same, pastel skin. It had her glasses. It never spoke to me, but it was kind of like at the foot of the bed. And it would just kind of look at me and then go away. So the third time it showed up, it was wearing, and I remember this very distinctly, it was wearing she had a jean outfit. This was the 90s, and so she had this like jean overcoat, and it had pearls, like pearl beads on it. It was really a very pretty outfit. But again, very distinctively her clothes. And, even her hairstyle, everything, just pastel skin and no face. And this time I remember that it spoke to me. And in fact, it interacted. It actually said something about, well, I'm going to go now. And it actually moved towards the door, like actually moved past the bed to the door that would have led to my porch and gone outside. And I swear that this thing handed me a chew toy for one of my pugs that was in the bed with me. When I woke up, there was no chew toy because that would have been totally creepy. But I don't know what that was, and I never, ever saw it again. 3 times. And I've always been wondering about other people who've seen, like, these faceless entities. It took the shape of my mom, but it wasn't my mom. And she, of course, says that she wasn't out there. In order for her to get in there, she would have had to unlock the door. It could be some sort of gray state sleep or old hag syndrome, but I've had that phenomenon in the past, and it's always seemed much more dreamlike. This figure looked really solid. So, and usually if it's a sleep paralysis, for me, there's a sensation of 2 presences, one major, one minor. I don't know what that's about. Deal with my subconscious mind. So, there you go. Since that time, I grew up, got 3 graduate degrees and a doctorate, and graduated, and ended up with a full-time faculty position that I quit because Florida education. We'll talk about that another time. But I ended up buying the house literally next door to my mother. It had gone up on the market. I had actually known 3 separate homeowners before it went up on the market, because I had lived next door for probably 20 some odd years, 21 years. And I was walking my pugs down the alley past this house, and a little voice in my head said, it didn't say I should buy this house, it said you should buy this house. And I'm like, okay, that's got to be my higher consciousness telling me. And I wasn't really serious about it. I had just gotten out of my doctorate, I had just gotten my job. But I mentioned it to Mom, and she's like, yeah, maybe you should. And so we kind of looked at it more seriously. This was at the end of the housing bubble burst in Florida. From 2008, I got the house in 2011, and I was able to get it for what is now like a third of its value, because the prices here have escalated so fast and so high. But when I moved into this house, of course, because I have a paranormal team, I had my team investigate the house. I want my pugs to be safe, and I want to make sure there was nothing residue here. And it turns out that for a short time, there was a homeowner that I never met, probably the original homeowner, who was a husband and wife. The husband was in the military, he passed away, and the wife lived here for like another 20 years before the next homeowner got it, and he lived here 25 years, and I knew him. And people kind of sensed her kind of off to the side in the front room. And I don't know if she's still here or not, but the weird thing was that usually sometime between February, March, April, kind of in that time period, I would be awakened right around 7 o'clock in the morning by what sounded like a muffled conversation coming from the living room. Now, the living room has the original windows. I've not replaced those, and I initially thought maybe it was some noise from outside, but when I would check, there was nobody near them, and for somebody to do that, they'd have to cross my entire lawn, which is, it's a good lawn, and stand outside the window and talk pretty loudly for me to hear them all the way in the bedroom of my house. So that happened for about 7 years. I've been here 13, and I haven't heard it in a while. So I'm assuming that she's kind of faded away, but it was just kind of cool. It didn't seem to upset the pugs, and as long as they're cool and safe, then I'm cool, as long as I'm also safe. So there you go.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I've tried to record this a few times and I keep getting interrupted, but I have quite a few ghost stories because I am indeed a spooky person and I'm drawn to spooky things. So I volunteer for haunted houses. My mom's birthday is October 31st, and just in general, I like to do things like ghost hunting and stuff like that. So, I'll start with a couple from the haunted house that I work at. Hopefully I don't get interrupted this time. I've tried to record this a few times. It was in 2016, I remember, because my son was 2, and I was sweeping through the haunt. There was a sliding door. There's 4 halls, and there's sliding doors in them, so that way we can trick people so they don't know which way they're going. But I was sweeping out the floor so we can get that scene ready. Me and my son go to the main area to eat, and when we come back, the sliding doors that I had previously opened up so I could clean were all shut, and I was like, what the heck, because it's just me and my son there. We go back out because he wanted to keep eating, and then he told me that he's seen a gray man standing in the hallway right in front of us. And I was like, alright, that's enough of that. We're going to sit outside, which we did. We sat outside in the grass until the owner came, and then we all went back inside. And I told him about it, and he was like, oh, you're full of it. Another instance at this same haunted attraction, I was preparing a doll scene, and we got a bunch of dolls donated to us from, like, people, and we picked them up at garage sales. So we had all kinds of dolls, baby dolls, porcelain dolls, stuff like that. So I seen these twin porcelain sister dolls, and they both had curly brown hair, bonnets on, pretty white lace dresses, and little white shoes. And I was like, these guys look like the twins from The Shining. Not really, but like, in a sense. Anyways, I hang them up on the wall together because in my head they wanted to be together. I go to get more stuff to hang up more dolls, like screws and stuff like that. And when I come back, but their shoes are off, and they're pressed up against the wall. Like, you know when you take your shoes off in your house and you put them up against the wall, you're like, okay, I'll just leave them here. They were put neatly up against the wall, and I was only there with 2 other people working on the haunt at the time. And I went and I confronted them both, and I was like, alright, very funny, you guys, haha, I know you're messing with me. But they both said that they were trying not to kill themselves putting together a wood prop or whatever, and I believed them, and I do believe them. I think that there was something to do with those creepy dolls. The cool thing about this haunted house is that there's cameras throughout the whole thing. So I will say that I think it starts about the end of September. There's these orbs, white orbs that float around, and you can see them on the camera. And they're not dust particles, because there's a difference between sweeping and then checking the camera and then just in general orbs floating up and down the halls. Anyways, towards the end of October every year, it starts off like a few, like 1, 2, or 3, and then at the end of the year it's like 50 down each of the cameras. And on Halloween night, this is my favorite part every year, is to watch the outside cameras, because the orbs come flying out of the building. Well, it's not a building, it's trailers. They come flying out, and they're just like scattered through the sky. So I think that's really creepy as well. And most recently, we were doing a Krampus event over December, and my son, he's 10, he wanted to be Jack Frost. So I was like, okay, we weren't open too late. We were open till 10. He wanted to be with his mom, so I was like, of course. And his job was dressed as a snowman, scary snowman, of course, to throw these like cotton snowballs at the customers as they came through. But when one of the groups came through, he had to run to the bathroom, so he told the main person that he wanted to go, and he left. And the people watching the cameras, they were like, oh, you did such a good job throwing the snowballs at them. And he's like, I wasn't even in there. I had to run to the bathroom. And we asked everybody else that was in that designated area if they went in there to cover for him, and they all said no. So apparently the ghosts were having fun throwing snowballs at the patrons. Another ghost story I have is from when I was working at a haunted house in Arizona. A haunted trailer, this was like a house trailer, was donated by some family, and me and a coworker were sitting in the windowsill talking to another coworker who was right outside the window, and we were all like laughing, chatting, having a good time, and from behind us we could hear a noise, and it was like, like, it sounded like somebody was like mimicking us, because we were supposed to be zombies. So we turned around and we're like, alright, very funny. Couldn't find anybody at all. And then later on we got like the full story of that trailer and why it was donated. Apparently the bedroom that we were in, the man had offed his wife in there, and then he went into the bathroom and he offed himself as well. And that trailer has a lot of scary stories. I think there used to be like a blind girl who worked in there, and she used to say things to the static on the TV. And then there's also this little frog toy that was in there, and it would go off and there's no batteries. Like the cords, the wires to it were split, cut up. So that was pretty weird. Okay, so a ghost hunting story. I went with my friend and her boyfriend, and I wanted to go out to this house in the sticks. It was like in the middle of nowhere. It's an old farmhouse out in the country, and one of the first red flags was like my car was acting weird. My car got filled with mud on the bottom, and it was making a loud thud underneath as the mud spun and hit the bottom of my car. So I was like, I didn't like that because I didn't want to get stuck out in the middle of nowhere with my friends and not have anybody to call for help because it's like 2 a.m. But when we pulled up to the front of this old farmhouse, because we were going to park in the back, but that's where my car kept getting like stuck. We pulled up to the front, I got out to use the bathroom, and when I was using the bathroom, I heard this loud dragging noise, like somebody was dragging a piece of furniture upstairs in that house. And my friends in my car had the spirit box going, and they said that all the spirit box was saying, let's leave, go, get out, like repeatedly. And I thought that was weird, so I was like, you know what? It's a sign. We gotta go. So I was like, we're not staying here, because I don't know if there's a person in there. All the windows were smashed out, or if it was like a spirit. But that house was abandoned, and it was quite literally in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so this is like a not so scary experience, but I was dreaming. I was in my bedroom, and the sun was peeping through the window, and this is how my dream was. I was laying in my bed and the sun was peeping through my window. I rolled over, looked over at my door, and this woman comes barging through my bedroom door, and she's telling me, get up, you're gonna be late. Sure enough, I woke up, like, quite literally, because I was like, who the heck is this lady in my room? And I roll over, I check my time on my phone, and I see that it's 7 a.m. I was like, oh crap. I had to be at work at 7, so I called my supervisor, told her I was gonna be late. Luckily it was only half an hour, but I'm pretty sure that lady woke me up. I'm hearing noises. I work night shift by myself. Okay, so I bought a Ouija board from Marshall's for $10, and I kept it in my car. And I noticed that like weird things started happening when I kept it in my car. I would get all these like black flies. Little black flies would just stick to my car as if it was a freaking cow or whatever. And I would get it washed, and the flies would always come back. So I was like, this is weird. But, you know, in Amityville Horror, the bugs and stuff are attracted to that evil. So I bring the Ouija board into my apartment, and I put it under my bed, and I just kind of like forget about it for a while. And then eventually, and my ex at the time, he ended up staying over and more often. I'm laying down in my bed and I'm asleep, and I felt like I got dragged out of my bed. Like I was at the top of my bed and then I was at the bottom. So I was like, alright, this guy's messing with me. I went to go check and see where he was, because he wasn't in my room. He was playing video games, and when I went back into my room, I realized that the foot that felt like it had been dragged was right above the Ouija board. And I was like, all right, that's enough of that. I didn't even touch it. I did whatever ritual things that it said on the internet to do to close it, and I put that shit in the basement. So that's a few of them. Variation, short version. I don't go into a huge amount of detail because I don't remember a huge amount of detail, and I'm not going to make something up to spice it up. But, yeah.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
So my son can see spirit with his eyes. Yeah. It's been a wild few years. Started during COVID when I was home with him doing schooling and I was working and he would not leave me alone. So he would tell me when I left, he saw shadow people in the space we were in, 2 of them in particular. So he would not be left alone. Fast forward a few years later, he's still doing this at 8 years old. He's still doing this at 8, won't be alone, sleeps with his lights on, puts a cover over his head, terrified when the lights go out or when he's alone. Not normal for an 8-year-old. So I finally try to figure out what's up. I go to a medium and I'm like, hey, could this be a real thing? Could it actually be spirit? And she's like, yeah, it could absolutely be spirit. Some people see spirit with their eyes. I'm like, huh? Like, I thought the sixth sense was like totally fake. No, turns out it wasn't. So she gives me some tips and tricks on how to deal with it. We find out who the spirits are. It's all family hanging around the house through some evidence. I'm teaching my son how to communicate. So my son being able to see spirits and see dead people with his physical eyes got me into mediumship. All because I went full ass mama bear mode and wanted to protect my son from the things that we don't see on a day-to-day basis, but he can see. So there you go. Yeah, just be open to these ghosts. They're real.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So as a kid, my family would move around a lot. And one year, we actually moved into this old white house. And, you know, everything was nice. We knew it was old. We knew it was built in like the 1800s. And we didn't know any history about it. We just knew it was like a historic old house. And so, you know, we just went about our business. I wasn't living there full time because half the time I was living with my mom. And then half the time with my dad was in this house. And so, you know, over the course of like a couple months, there was things that would happen, not particularly to me, but I would just hear about it. Like my sister would be in the room and she would like start screaming and fall on the floor because something was in there. Or we would hear this random like jewelry box sound in the kitchen just once and we never heard it again. Like there was just like weird things and kind of just weird feelings. We're just like, okay, that's strange, but whatever. But then I don't remember, I think I was like 11 maybe. I was in, you know, I was going to bed. It was me, my brother, and my sister that shared one of the bedrooms because it was a larger bedroom and I was only there part-time. So yeah, it was all 3 of us in one room. So the one night I went to bed like normal. I was always a little freaked out in that house, but you know, I just chalked it up to me being nervous because I'm always like have anxiety and nervous. So, but that night I went to bed and then I woke up, I think around, I don't know, it probably was like 1 a.m. I had my phone with me, something like that. And every time I wake up during the middle of the night, I'll look to my right, look to my left, because I was in the middle like twin bed, and just to check to make sure my siblings are doing okay, like nobody's like up or whatever. So I look to my right, my sister's fine. I look to my left, and I notice at the end of the bed, there's something see-through sitting at the end of my brother's bed. And I'm like trying to be calm about it. But also it looked like a man in like, just like kind of plain clothes and was holding something glowing in his hand. I didn't know what was going on. And I was just staring, like, am I seeing things? I don't know. So I just kept staring, and this man kept like putting this glowing thing towards me to like look at, and I was just like, I don't think I said anything. I just kind of was like shaking my head and was like, I don't know. And I was slightly starting to panic. Like I wasn't panicked when I first saw it, and then I was like, okay, I'm probably just dreaming. There's nothing wrong. Let me close my eyes and let me open them again and it'll be gone. And so I did that, and he was still sitting there. And so I did it probably 2 or 3 more times. He was still sitting there, and I was like, okay, I need to not panic. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to sleep. I'm gonna pretend this is not happening, and hopefully he'll go away. So eventually I fell asleep, and then I woke up the next morning. I was like, I cannot believe that happened. I don't know what happened. And the craziest thing was, I think a couple weeks later, my stepmom had looked into the history of the house, and supposedly the husband of the family that built this whole house for his like 12 kids or something, one day ended up going to, I guess, to the market, and he was sick, and he ended up not coming home. He ended up dying on his way either there or coming back. And so that's who we think that I saw. And also my siblings have seen a man as well in like different uniform, like some in uniforms. Mine was just kind of more plain clothes. So, but we've seen a man around that whole house, and it's just crazy to think about that day, because that's my one crazy ghost story that I always hold on to.
You guys want to see something fucking crazy? We're in New Orleans for a wedding.
Okay, wait, I have a story about this convent that I need to get across to you guys. So I have been going to New Orleans since I was in my mom's womb, and I love this place from the bottom of my heart. And I could tell you stories about the French Quarter for days and days and days. But this one story, it happened years ago. They have ghost tours and vampire tours and a bunch of different tours in the French Quarter that they offer. And my family always loves to go on these tours. And one in particular tour, though, it was a ghost tour. I was a little kid, and this was a tour that they held at night. They have it at all different times, but we went to the night one because, you know what? We wanted it spookier. So we did, we walked around. This guy, the tour guide, oh my God, let me tell you, he looked just like Van Helsing. If he told me he was a vampire, I would have believed it 100%. So he was walking around telling us stories about the different vampires around the city. And then he got to this convent. And so he was telling us the story on how you saw this, where about the casket girls and how, they came over because they wanted more women, and then they ended up dying, and then they put them into the caskets, and weird things were happening, and they thought they were vampires, and so they locked them in the attic. So he told us this story, and then he was telling us a story about him doing the same exact tour at night years prior, before Katrina happened. And he said he was on the tour, he was doing everything like normal, and he walked up to this convent and had, everybody standing in front of him, and he was telling them the story about the casket girls. And then he stops briefly to turn and look at the convent. So, like she said, those third-story windows are bolted shut. They are bolted shut because they say it's because of the vampires. They do not open. They will never open. That's not something that happens. If you see them open, you run. Like, it is a big, it's just a thing. So he said he looked up to see that those third-story windows, and he said he saw one of the doors swinging in the wind. Just swinging. And he said it looked like it all splintered open, almost like someone had rammed through it. And he said he could also see the glistening of the window pane behind that door. And he said it didn't look broken. He could see that the window was not broken. It was completely intact, but that wood panel was flapping in the wind. And he said he got so terrified by that because of all the stories that he took his group and he left. And he said within the week, Katrina hit. And he said he doesn't know what dark forces was it could have been coincidence, but he said why in that one time, all these years that he's been doing this, he saw this happen, and then something horrible struck the city. And to this day, if I ever see something like that happen to that convent, I will be booking it out of there so quick, because I am not about to be a part of any of that. He was also telling us that he has gone into this convent because they do tours, like the convent, the people in the convent do tours to show like the convent. And he says he's went in there and he's asked about, oh, you know, there's stories about the third floor. Can you tell us anything? And he said they like, oh, no, nothing's up there. It's just like a bunch of boxes and you don't have to worry about it. That's it. And changed the subject and completely just went on with the tour. And he says he's also tried to contact them directly and ask them, hey, you know, I'm a part of this. Can I, is there any like way that I can go up there just so I can see, like, you know, and tell my tour? You know, nowadays it's just boxes. Nope, will not let him up there. He says he's had other friends try to go up there. They will not let him up there. So supposedly it's sealed. Supposedly. And the thing is like, if it's just boxes, if it's just like things from the church that they're just keeping up there, what's so bad about you just letting someone like look up there? Oh, okay, yeah, I see you have boxes. I see there's like storage up here. But for them to switch up and be like, nope, nothing's up there, change the subject, and be like, no, you can't go up there, just because of that. I mean, maybe they're trying to hold true to these rumors, but I don't know. It's a little sketchy.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I've been waiting for an opportunity like this. Let's go. Quick backstory about the house that I'm currently in with my wife in 2018. And it was a flip. I had been sitting for about 3 years before anyone came in to redo it to sell it. So now let's fast forward to the summer of 2022. And also I want to say that this is the first thing that's actually happened here. If you want to know more about it, just let me know and I'll tell you more, or I'll just make another video, whatever. So anybody knows when you have a newborn, there's a lot of no sleeping going on. So this one particular morning, I think it was about like 7 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of the night, my son woke up in his sleep, so I went into his room to, you know, soothe him, get him back to sleep, and I ended up falling asleep in his room. So, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's like 7 o'clock in the morning, but it's how I woke up. So, I get woken up by someone touching my arm, like going up my arm, like that. And with the sensation of like feeling like a hand touching my arm and like going up, it's like with the sensation going up is how my eyes open. Like, so the feeling going up my arm was slow, but like my eyes start to open slow with the feeling opening up. So with that feeling, I kind of like, you know, jump out of my sleep and I'm like opening up my eyes, so everything is like really blurry. But within my vision, I thought I saw my wife waking me up. And within like those few seconds, I saw that, you know, she was like crouched down. And I feel like I watched her from the crouched position stand up, kind of look at me, turn around, and walk out of the room. So like, you know, I'm even rubbing my eyes, trying to, you know, just get my vision back. And I even felt like within those like 2 seconds, because all this happened like so quick, that even just for me, like rubbing my eyes, I felt like she walked out and got out of the room like super quick. And I feel like I watched her walk kind of slow. So yeah. So from there, I get up, stretch, and I walk out the room and then into my room where my wife is in bed with our newborn daughter. But when I get in there and I look in at the bed, my wife is asleep, like deep sleep, like such a deep sleep that me trying to process this whole thing Like, there's no way that from the moment she came and woke me up and got into that room, that she got back into bed, comfortable, underneath the blanket, and fell back to sleep. There's no way that she fell asleep that fast, because she's just not that type of person. So that was freaky. Freaky, I was mind blown. I'm just like, what just happened? Because I know for sure I saw her wake me up, even like touch my arm, which isn't out of the ordinary for her. That's how she even wakes me up, or like a way that she wakes me up. So that's like even not out of character for her to even do. So I was just really dumbfounded. So now a second morning, and again, I feel like it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. And a quick backstory, around this time, again, my daughter is a newborn, and she is like throwing up a lot, breast milk, how babies do. So there's been like so many times where she throws up, and we gotta clean up a lot. So again, I'm in my son's room because he woke up in the middle of the night, and I fell asleep in there with him. And not even 2 seconds after me waking up, all of a sudden I hear from my room, it's my wife's voice saying she just fucking threw up everywhere. So for me hearing that, I'm like, okay, it's not something that I want to do as soon as I wake up. But I get up, I walk out the room into my wife's room, and can you guess what happened? Yeah, I walk in, and her and my daughter are both still sound asleep. And I don't know how to explain that. I've definitely had some more experiences in this house, so just, I guess, like, comment, tell me you want to hear more, and I'll tell you more. I'll be glad to tell you more.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Alright, so we back. Let's get it. Back again, hopping on this trend. Let's go. So if you saw my first video, I'm talking about the house that I moved into with my wife in 2018 and the house that I am currently living in. So even just purchasing the home, looking through the home at first, and even moving into the home, nothing felt off. I definitely feel like I'm someone who's pretty sensitive to paranormal, ghost things, whatever you want to call, spiritual, whatever. I'm not exactly sure when things started to happen, but it was relatively at the beginning of living in the house. But it was like little things, like I would turn off lights at night because now I'm paying my own electric bill, so I'm definitely making sure lights are being turned off. I would turn off the dining room light at night, and then I'd wake up in the morning and it'd be on, and just sit there kind of stuck and confused. And I asked my wife, like, yo, did you wake up in the middle of the night and like turn the light on, forget to turn it off? And she would say no, and I'm like, and then she'd be like, did you turn it off? Are you sure you turned it off? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I turned that off. So that was one thing. And then something else that would happen was the kitchen was redone, and whoever flipped the house, they put in like a farmhouse sink. So I don't know if anyone knows exactly what it is, but like it's just a bigger sink, and it's metal. But yeah, it's just a big metal sink. And I would have times where I'd be alone in the house, and it would just sound like someone's running the faucet. Like I would hear the faucet going, like the water even like hitting the sink. And it also sounded like someone was like doing the dishes, to where I would hear like utensils, forks, knives, spoons, things like that, just kind of like hitting the sink, like they're being like dropped in there, just like someone's washing the dishes. And it wasn't just me, because even times where my wife was alone at the house, she would hear the same thing. And at this time too, when we moved in, we didn't have any kids, so it was just me and her. So there are a good few times where it was just us in the house, or just one or the other in the house, and experiencing these things. And there was also times where all of a sudden I would get a huge whiff of cigarettes. Don't smoke cigarettes. My wife don't smoke cigarettes. There's even times where, like, at that time I was working 12-hour night shifts, so my wife would come in from being done at work, and I had my day off, And I would ask her, like, yo, like, did you stop at your grandma's house before you came here? And she'd be like, no, and ask me why. And I'm like, dude, like, I smell a strong scent of cigarettes. Couldn't explain that. Also, one particular night, again, it's just me and my wife and our 2 little dogs. We have 2 chihuahuas. And our backyard wasn't fenced in yet, so we had to walk them for them to use the bathroom. And this time, I watched my wife take both our dogs out, and I'm watching her out like the front window. It's nighttime, and I'm watching her walk the dogs. And so it's just me in the house. I got the lights off. It's nighttime, and like our upstairs at that time was carpeted too. So carpet all on the main floor, up the hallway. And as I'm watching her outside with the dogs, all of a sudden I start to hear what to me sounded like a large dog kind of like speed walking down the hallway. Like, it caught my ear because like I turned to like look at the hallway, like what the f is about to walk up into the living room right now, because it, like I said, it sounded like a big dog to me. Like I could hear like the pads of their foot like just walking down the carpet, just like a gallop, I guess, in a sense. But I heard it and I was just like, what the f is about to walk out? But nothing came. Like, it was enough, it was loud enough to where, like, I'm telling you, I turned my head because I was just anticipating what was about to walk out of the hallway and into the living room with me. But nothing was there. There was also times where I would hear full conversations. Like, if I'm upstairs, it would sound like I'm hearing 2 people talking to each other, having a conversation downstairs, but it was muffled. So it was like I can hear someone talking, but I could not make out what was being said. Now, there are also times if I was downstairs, it would sound like someone's upstairs, 2 people having a conversation. Again, a muffled conversation to where like I know I hear someone talking, but I couldn't make out what was being said. And there was also times where I feel like I would hear music playing. And like if I was in the living room, all the rooms in the house are like in like the back of the house, I guess you want to call it, like down the hallway. So if I'm in the living room, I would hear music playing, and it almost seemed like so faint coming from like the back rooms. And to me, it sounded like old time music. I don't know. I feel like it'd be the type of music you would listen to on the record player. Now, a lot of this stuff freaks my wife out. She don't like talking about it. I like talking about it, but she doesn't, because she's had her own experiences, not even just in this house, experience that she's had like growing up in the house that she grew up in. But you know, we would have these conversations, and you know, she would just talk about like, I don't want to talk about it anymore, because she felt the more we talked about it inside the house, the more things would happen inside the house. So I'm just trying to respect it. So we stopped talking about it. And for a while, things would stop happening. And that's what it was too. It wasn't like almost frequent. It just happened like every now and then. It would just decide to pop up like, hey, I'm still here. But this one particular time we're both in the living room and we're on our phones. It got quiet because we were both just on our phones. And then so I just thought to mention like, hey, have you realized how we haven't heard or like had any experiences recently? And she just looked at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. So from her giving me that answer, I'm like, all right, she don't want to talk about it. I know she knows exactly what I'm talking about, but she don't want to talk about it. So I was like, okay, I just left it alone. No sooner that I finished my sentence, like, okay, like whatever, all of a sudden from the kitchen, it sounded like a glass got pushed across the counter, and we had granite countertops. So it just sounded like a glass cup get pushed across, and it like slid across the counter like a good distance, to where we both just stopped, froze, looked up from our phones, looked at each other, and I was like, you heard that, right? And she was like, yeah. So I got up so quick and I ran through that kitchen, and I'm looking all around like, what is on the counter? And I'm moving everything, like what's on the counter, trying to recreate what I just heard. And I even asked my wife, like, that was glass, right? Like, that was glass you heard? She was like, yeah. And there was nothing on my counter. No glass cup, nothing of me trying to recreate that sound that we had just heard. And still can't explain how that happened.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So I have been waiting for this trend. I have so many ghost stories. When I was a kid, I was very, very intuitive, and I could see things that like other people couldn't see, and I would mention it and people would be like, you're just using your imagination, like that's not real, you know, stuff that they say to kids who can see things. One example of this is I was like about 7, maybe even younger, and I was in my parents' bedroom, which was like the top floor of our house, and I saw in the corner like a little boy. So I was like, Mom, who is this little boy? She's like, there's no little boy here. And I'm like, there's a little boy sitting right there, like I can see him. Like, she's like, no, there wasn't a little boy, but you could tell she was like freaked out. She's like, there's no little boy here. And then we left the room, and she like still brings it up, and I'm like, yeah, I saw a little boy there. I used to see this ghost in our house, and I called him Uncle Bill because I told my mom it was her Uncle Bill. And she was like, how do you even know that I have an Uncle Bill? Because like I didn't know him. And I'm like, yeah, Uncle Bill sits at the bottom of the stairs. And she's like, okay, that's really creepy, but you know, it's in your imagination, blah, blah, blah. As a kid, this caused me like a lot of fear and anxiety. Like I had a bad phobia around ghosts and spirits because I could see them and like I was scared of them. So I think I like turned off that ability to like see them because I can't see them anymore, but I can still hear them. Like sometimes right before I fall asleep at night, or if I'm meditating, I'll hear like voices like say like hello, or I'll hear names. Like I heard somebody say Heather, even though that's not my name, but like, you know, I just hear like weird things and I try to piece it together, but it's kind of hard to hear now. I think I like either turned off or like tried to mute that ability because of my phobia. So then a couple of years ago, I actually decided to see a medium, and I wanted to talk to her about specifically my grandparents, but like I sort of didn't go into it with any expectations, and I found a medium on TikTok, and I contacted her and we set up a meeting. And the first thing she asked is like, is there anybody specifically you want to talk to? And I sort of wanted to see who was going to pull up. So I was like, no, we'll just see who shows up and handle it like that way. And she was like, are you a medium too? And I was like, I think so. Like, I know I told her what I just said. And she was like, yeah, you have a long line of spirits that want to talk to you. She's like, they're sort of just like knocking on your door trying to like get through to you. So she pinpoints this one particularly like vocal spirit, and she's like talking to the spirit, and she's like, are you a witch? And I was like, yeah, like a stranger wouldn't know that about me. Like I was just like a normal person. Like she's like, are you a witch? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, yeah, this ghost wants to talk to you because you're a witch, and she thinks that like she wants you to pass her on specifically because you're a witch. She was a witch in your hometown many years ago, and she feels really connected to you. She said, do you hear voices? Like, do you hear somebody trying to communicate with you? And I was like, yeah, all the time. Or like, you know, those liminal times when I'm sleeping or meditating. And she's like, yeah, that's her trying to be like, help me pass on. I was like, how do I do this? And then she got one of my ancestors to like help me help her pass on. But I didn't really do anything my ancestor said, so I'm sorry to that ghost. I never really helped her. And when I tell people these stories, they're like, you're insane. Like, are you sure it's not like a psychiatric disorder? I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I promise you it's not. It's just something I can do. I don't know.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so my grandma used to live out in the country, and she had like this wooded area behind her house. And I mean, it went on for miles, like miles and miles of just wooded area, dark shrub, trees, everything. And we used to play out there all the time, me and my cousins and my uncle. My uncle was like a year and a half older than me, but we were out there all the time. And one night, we were playing hide and seek, me and my uncle, and my sister and my grandpa were getting like a fire started, roasting the hot dogs and stuff. My grandma was cooking inside, and my uncle, he had just found me, so it was my turn to go find him. And so what we did is they would hide in the yard and the other person would count in the garage. So I was in the garage counting to 20. When I counted to 20, I went out to go find him, and I was calling his name. I couldn't find him anywhere, and I was like, Kyle, like, I can't find you. Where are you at? Like, I'm done looking for you. And then all of a sudden I heard this voice, and it was my uncle's voice. I heard him say Soraya. And a little backstory is I was adopted, and my birth name was Soraya, but when I was adopted, they had me change my name to Samantha. So, like, it was just very odd that he called me by my birth name and not, like, the name he knew me as. But it sounded just like him, so I was like, it's not like he didn't know what my birth name was. So, and it was coming down from, like, the bottom of the hill, which was really dark. Like, how my grandma's yard was, it's, like, flat. And then she had, like, a chicken coop here, and then the chicken coop had, like, a fence around it, and the fence kind of went down, like, at a slant, down, like, this hill. And at the bottom of this hill was, like, tall shrubs, field, and it went into the woods. And so, it was coming from down there in the dark, and I don't like the dark. I'm scared of the dark. Even to this day, I'm scared of the dark. And so I was, like, creeping up to it, like, to the top of, like, the hill where it starts to go down. I'm like, Kyle, like, come on up. Like, I don't want to go down there. And whoever, the voice that was speaking to me wasn't answering back to me. So, like, it was kind of, like, irritating me a little bit. I'm like, Kyle, I'm not going down there. Like, I'm not going to go down there and find you. And they weren't saying anything back. Like, he wasn't saying anything back. And I'm like, Kyle, come on. So, like, me, of course, I'm naturally just creeping my way down there. I'm like, Kyle, come on. And then it's hard to talk about. The voice said Soraya one more time, and I'm like, Kyle, like, I'm not going down there. Like, come on up. I'm scared. I don't want to go down there. And I got down, like, here's, like, where, like, the field starts, like, the trees, the wooded area. And like I said, it's pitch black, and I'm, like, right here. Like, I'm, like, 2 steps from entering in, and I hear, like, you haven't found me yet, come from behind me. I swung my head around so fast, and there was my uncle sitting on the porch. Like, he had just opened the door, and he, like, was like this, and he's like, you haven't found me yet? And it's like in those cartoon movies where, like, the character, like, can't run, and, like, they're just running in, like, in the spot that they are. And I felt like I couldn't move. And I just, once I found, like, the grip to go or whatever, I took off up that hill. And I was, like, sweating. I was so scared. And I told him, I'm like, have you been inside this whole time? And he's like, yes, I have. My grandma was super religious. And so I was like, I knew my grandma wouldn't lie to me if I asked her. So I asked her, I said, Grandma, like, has he been in here the whole time? She's like, yeah, he's been in here since the beginning. He's like, the moment you started counting, he's like, from the garage, he was like, I went inside. And I'm, like, literally freaking out at this point. Like, I don't know what to think. So I literally run out to my grandpa and my sister. And I said, like, I'm like, were you guys hiding down at the bottom of the field by the chicken coop? And they're like, no, we've literally been here. And, like, they had, like, the look on their faces, you could tell, like, they had no idea what I was talking about. Like, they were 100% telling the truth. Like, they were being serious. They're like, we're roasting hot dogs right now. We're not playing around. We're not goofing around type of emotion. And I'm, like, sitting here like, what the heck just happened? Like, what was that voice? And why did the voice sound exactly like my uncle? And so my grandma's like, she's like, you look like you've just seen a ghost. And my grandma being super religious, I was scared to tell her about it because I didn't know if she was going to believe me or not. And so, but, like, I was so shooken up from it that I literally told her, I said, like, I heard a voice that sounded like Uncle Kyle, and it wasn't him. He's been inside the whole time. And she's like, just her expression on her face was, like, so subtle. It was just like she'd seen it before type of look. She's like, those are what we call demons. And I don't know, like, it reassured me to an extent because it's like, okay, she believes me, like, I'm not going crazy. But it's like, has my grandma seen this before? Like, does she, like, the way she talked to me, it was just like it's happened before. Like, she's heard about it before type thing. I don't know. But, like, ever since that day, it was so hard for me to play out in the woods because I just felt like something was watching me. I felt like something was out there. And like I said, we used to play in the woods all the time back there. Like, we'd find like old medicine bottles. Like, we would, like, tear down some of the trees and, like, lay them down. Like, it was to this day, like, it's just a weird thing to talk about. And people are like, oh, it's skinwalkers, it's this, it's that. But, like, to this day, like, I still don't know what it is. To this day, I always wonder, like, had I taken those 2 steps and, like, got in there, what was waiting for me? Like, would I be here? You know, like, people, like, it sounds weird. People don't believe you, but I don't know. It was a crazy day.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so if you know me in real life, you've heard this one before. I've actually tried to tell it on here and then got spooked and quit. So I'm going to just super condense it. I guess if you all want more details, you can ask. And if you're interested, I'll tell you more. But, like, the basic rundown of the entire situation, and yes, I'm talking fast for time reasons, is that I had a best friend whose mother used to work at this place. It was a convalescence home. The last 10 years or so that it was open, it closed in 2008. It's about 30 minutes from my house. But before that, way back in the day, it was a children's polio hospital. And she said that when she worked at the convalescence home, that there was certain parts of the building that were just off limits to everybody. Like even pizza delivery guys and shit could not go down that side of the building. And she had all these crazy stories of like weird shit that happened to her when she worked there, right? And she was not the only person that I'd ever heard talk about this. But at that time, I didn't have a spiritual bone in my body, didn't know anything about the shit, and was like literally couldn't believe in it if I didn't see it, right? So I go in there totally sarcastic and made this really insensitive comment before we even got there. Like we were on the road leading there, probably 500 yards from the place, and I made this really insensitive comment that I ended up regretting deeply. But anyway, so we go in, nothing happens, and we are videoing the whole time that we're in there, both of us, and it was just me and her the first time. And you know when you feel something like run up behind you, like when somebody's behind you and they're just come like pummeling towards you, like as we were getting ready to climb back out the window that we had to go through to get in, and the statute of limitations is run. This was like 2013, so I don't care. Yes, we broke in. In the video, when I felt that shit running up behind me, it was like this big gray whitish orb. And then in the video, when it shoulder checks me, which is what it felt like, it just crashes straight into my shoulder on the left side. And all these orbs, like thousands, hundreds of thousands of like little green orbs are what it split up into. And then they just went straight over my head. Right. So after that, we were like, oh, fuck yeah, we're going back. Well, we did some research this time before we went back. And also, she and I both are now several years off of DRUGS. But at the time, we were just both like hot mess train wrecks, right? So I fought through being like dope sick the second time for a couple days because I wanted to make sure that like whatever happens is like not psychosis or like DRUG induced psychosis, and I wanted to make sure that like I was in the right state of mind because that shit really kind of creeped me out when I saw myself in the video with the orbs over my head, right? And so the second time we go back, we took two other people, her little sister and her little sister's buddy, who I'd never met, never seen since. And before we even go in, weird shit's happening, right? Like we're around back getting ready to go in the window, and we see all these people and like shadow people in the windows. There was a tree out back. It sounded like there was a noose swinging from it. And there was no wind, not a bit of wind at all. And the tree branches were blowing back. We could hear all this creepy music, and this is just from outside, right? It looked like there was a couple dancing in one of the windows, and we were like, holy shit. And then we all started like freezing, like the temperature just dropped. And this was probably like springtime. It was not, yeah, it definitely was springtime. It was not that cold out. And again, no wind. But this place had an old iron lung. And that really, like, I'm into shit like that. I'm, like, morbid like that. And that was, like, specifically what I wanted to see. But it was in the basement, and her mother had told us, do not go in that fucking basement no matter what you do. Well, that's the first place we went this time. And we all have our phones out, and we're recording every second of this. We made sure our batteries were charged. Like, again, we did some research. We brought some shit with us. And the first place we went was down to that iron lung. Well, I'm trying to crawl in the motherfucker, and out comes this black cat. This black cat followed us the entire duration of the time we were there. Now, keep that black cat in mind for later. So we go through, and all kinds of weird shit happened. We even got to a point upstairs in that part of the same part of the building. We found out later that her mom said nobody was allowed down. Everybody else started walking down that corridor except for me because the smell of like sulfur just like overtook my soul. Like I literally went as far as I could until I literally threw up, like right in the middle of the hallway. Like it was so strong and it smelled so bad. And I was like, guys, like how are you? And nobody else smelled it. We went into a room that had a Bible that was open to a certain 3-digit page and had some weird shit written in it. And then I thought that it was just like, oh, local Satanists, because the county or the city, I think the city it's in actually owned the building at the time, and they used it for like evidence and shit like that, which we did take an old bong from the police evidence room. Again, statute of limitations is ran. I don't give a fuck. It was from like the 70s. It was dope as fuck. It was a moon. And then we also took I took a video, like a VHS tape of what was, I put it in a player, and it turned out to be a shooting at a local gas station. It was the security tape from like 20 years prior. So we did take stuff the first time. But anyways, back to the Bible. It had all these Bibles scattered all over the place, but the one was open to the 3-digit page, and it was up on like a pedestal. And as soon as we saw that shit, the dude that we were with, the little sister's friend, he just has a seizure. And I'm like, great, now we're going to have to carry this fucking asshole out of here. You know what I mean? Like, not realizing what, I didn't think anything about it. So I just kind of thought, since other people broke into the place, because it was a mess. Like, the place was dilapidated AF. Like, there was spray paint everywhere, and it was all in, like, pentagrams and shit like that. So I really just thought that was somebody doing that. But I come to find out much later after the fact, there's a local museum that has that Bible, and long story short, they've done a lot of shit, and nobody can really claim for why it was in the condition it was in, because it had some shit I don't know. Anyway, so weird shit's happening. At one point, before we go down that egg smell corridor, we're sitting on these steps that go up to this room, which is like an attic. We just peeked in the room, like we didn't really like discover it or anything like that, but we did hear like footsteps, like somebody, like people dancing, and it was a lot of people. Like, we heard this old-timey ass music that was like somebody was playing like a player piano, and we heard a shitload of people like dancing. It sounded like there was like a rager being thrown upstairs, and we're just sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and then we would hear like footsteps coming down the hall and shit. And I spent a lot of time in one particular room with my phone recording the entire time, right? Well, fast forward, when we leave, I start watching these videos as we're going down the road. Every single time that I go to watch these videos, they're changing. I am in the video. Hollywood couldn't have made a better horror story from what I saw. I was in the video holding my own phone that I had in my hand watching the video, and all of a sudden, like, it tilt shifted again. It looked like a tree sprouts up out of the wall, and it looks like it's dangling me by my feet upside down. And then that goddamn cat turned into like a hell dog, which I didn't know demon dogs were a thing at the time, with these red ass eyes, and it would just like laser its eyes straight on me. And then at the end of every video was that clip of me saying that insensitive comment that I made 500 yards from the place. Made that insensitive comment. Nobody had their camera out, or nobody had a phone out. It was not recorded. But there I was. It was like the camera was on me and saying that insensitive comment. Basically was like only the beginning of it. When I got home, the shit got so much worse. And if you guys want a part 2, I'll give you one. But yeah, that's part 1 of like what happened there. Okay, so part 2. So we go back to my friend's house, and because of the fact that like so much undeniable shit had happened while we were in there, I mean, there was stuff that I've long since forgotten to mention that I didn't even mention in the first video. Like, wild shit happened, right? I am the one who doesn't believe in any of this, and I am the one who seems the most interested in it, which was strange to me, because it's like, you fucking went looking for this. I'm giving you what you went looking for, and you're not interested? I'm gonna assume in hindsight that she was just like super scared to even deal with it, because my friend was like worried about any and everything in the world but what was going on. And she's the one who wanted to go seek this out, not me. Anyway, she was wanting to go hook up with some dude. How you can have that on your mind when this is going on is beyond me. Again, I think it just scared the fucking sense out of her. I don't know. But I'm still at her house, and I get on the computer to like upload these videos because I want to put them on Facebook. Like, look what I got. Well, her mother starts watching. In one of them, there was this like guy. He was like a Pacific Islander, and he was wearing relatively modern clothes, which is what confused me. He had on these like camo shorts, and he looked like he was mangled. He had on a white T-shirt. He looked like he'd been in a car accident. There was BLOOD all over his white T-shirt, and one of his arms was not there, or partially there. Yeah, and he was pressed into the wall, and his neck was at least 12 feet long, and then he had a face. It was hella fucking scary. And in all these videos, there's that fucking cat that turns into this hell dog with the eyes. So her mom's like, what you got there is an apparition. Like, no shit, thank you. And my friend's just not at all even acknowledging that this is going on. And I'm up all night because when you have something that fucking terrifying, like right here, like here's proof of this, you know, you're naturally like geeked up. Like if you would have seen me at the time, you would have thought I was on Beth with an M. I was not. I was stone sober. And I got online and tried to upload these videos from my phone to Facebook. I took a screenshot. Well, the videos wouldn't upload at all. Even to the computer, like, it would let me play them, but it wouldn't download them. But anyway, I took a screenshot from the one with the tree dangling me upside down. I posted it on Facebook, and there was 2 people who commented. The first one was like, holy fucking shit. The second one was like, oh my God, when you go back, I'm going with you. And then the third person that commented was like, I don't see anything. And I went and looked, and the little square where the picture once was now black. So it was able to like manipulate the technology. And please don't start hollering, post the videos, because this was 2013. That phone crashed out entirely. I do not fucking inside my house of it being in there. But that's way later in the story, so you're just gonna have to fucking wait. So don't start hollering, post the videos, because why the fuck would I do that if it won't let me take a screenshot of it, even if I still had them? Why the fuck would it let me post it? Duh. So there's that. So my friend goes, and she's just like gallivanting around with this dude, not worried about it at all. And I sit there wide awake with my eyes like popping out of my head all night long because I'm like, I cannot believe this. And of course, at some point, I asked her to send me the videos from her phone because she had some weird videos too of just like actual shit that we caught inside of there. She wouldn't do it. I don't know if like this thing attached to me because I was so like nonchalant and disrespectful, or if it launched to me because I was like the most grounded out of everyone, which is crazy, but I was. We were all a mess. God love her, but she was a train wreck. I was the most sane person out of all of these people. So I don't know why this stuck to me. I don't know why she refused to acknowledge it, but she pissed me the fuck off is what she did. So I had gotten dropped off. I didn't drive there. I gotten dropped off there. So I called my grandma and was like, can y'all come get me? And my grandpa and my son, who was 4 at the time, he was turning 5 the next month, we're on the way back, and I start hearing the faint sound of this dog barking. And while I'm sitting there trying to convince myself that I'm just crazy, that this is not real, and that I'm going to fuck around and manifest this on accident, my son goes, doggy, or something like that. And I was like, oh my God. We were in the car. There was no fucking dog to be seen. But it was just like this fake, because, you know, they say kids can sense shit like that. And that was my number one fear as soon as I sat down on her couch and felt something kicking me in the side. I was like, my kid. So that scared me to death. And I just stuck my finger in my mouth and bit my fucking thumbnail straight down to the middle of my finger, like in one chomp. I was like, oh my God. If you would have seen me, I'd have been white as a fucking sheet. So there was this cherry blossom tree in the front yard that we planted when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And this year it only bloomed for like a week, maybe a week and a half, but it was fucking beautiful. And it was just like this center of like light and like brightness at the house. And when I got home, it was like 1:30. I sat underneath that tree until the sun went down at about 8:30 that night, scared to death to go in the house because my grandparents, my grandmother specifically, I was sitting there thinking, how in the fuck am I going to go in there and act normal, knowing that I have this possible issue? Because I didn't know for sure that it had followed me from her house. I just tried to blame it on her, saying it stuck to her, but I internally knew it was me. But nothing had, other than the dog barking in the car, nothing had really happened yet. But I was so paranoid it would, that I was like, how am I going to explain this to my grandmother, who is essentially a Southern Baptist cultist? I mean, I hate to say it like that, but it's like brimstone and hellfire cult type shit. The way that she fervently and just crazy, like, you know, very much into it. And I was like, I cannot possibly go in there and be like, hey, Mom, I brought a demon home, you know, because she's going to shit a motherfucking brick. Well, I knew she would have me committed, too. That was the big one. So I sat under this tree all day doing research, which was a huge mistake in hindsight. Shouldn't have done that, because that put all kinds of weird shit in my head. And then finally, when it became dark outside, I went in the house and I sat there on the couch after everybody was asleep, and I sat there, hardly even blinked, for 8 hours with my eyes glued to the fucking corner of the room, where I started seeing what looked like a pile of natural gas coming up out of the carpet. And at first it looked like that dog in the shade. Like it wasn't like, it was 3D, but it wasn't super clear what it was. At first it looked like a certain family member of mine that I was very close to, who died when I was 4 or 5. It looked like him, and it looked like he had his head in his hand, and it looked like he was either crying or hysterically laughing, and then it morphed into that dog. And I sat there watching that shit. It was like a mirage in the road. You know when it's like a heat mirage? Like, you can see the shit that looks like natural gas in the road, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. It was like that. And then behind me on the wall, there was this shadow to Antonio Banderas, because he looked like him in Once Upon a Time in Mexico, where he had that hat on and shit. I was like, okay, Antonio Banderas, cute story. So I sat there until daylight, and then I finally went to bed, because during the daytime, this thing was not that active. So I sat there all night, eyes wide open, until daylight. And when I heard my grandparents up moving around, because I thought, you know, the way that she is with religion, like, nothing will get her. It'll be all right. So I was trying the best I could to, like, logic this into making sense. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just like sleep deprivation, because you didn't sleep the night before. You need to go get some sleep and revisit this later with a more chill mind, right? So I went to sleep. I went to bed when my grandparents were moving around, probably like 7:30, and woke up at like 11:30, and this became the routine for the next however long. Now, keep in mind, from this point, this was back in 2013, so this was 11 years ago. It's foggy. There's things I've long since forgotten about, and the chronological order of things from this point on might be a little like shaky. Some things may have happened before others, whatever. So just kind of try to like cluster it all together and just get a bigger picture, general understanding of what I'm trying to say. Because a lot of this was very traumatic for me. This went on for like 2 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks. It might not have. It might have been 4 or 5 days, but it was several days. I went and sat under that tree, scared to death of being in the house, because like, while it was calmer during the day, the shadow man was there all the time. And the natural gas pile was there all the time. And the more that I thought about saying something to my grandparents, because this natural gas is right beside where he sits, I was like, bitch, they will have you committed. And I have never, not once, not been the sole, like, legal guardian for my child. Like, my child has never been out of my custody. I've been very absent at certain times, unfortunately. I was always, like, legally his custodial parent. So I was also worried if you plunge headfirst off the deep end, that might change. So I had to really like convince myself to stay calm. So I went and sat under this tree, got on the internet, started reading shit. If you ever have something like this happen, do not do that. Do not do that. Because I'm like, I gotta make this go away. Because I had opened my video app and I'm watching these videos like habitually, religiously on like every 15-minute time schedule. At this point, it's not just changing videos, it's rapidly adding them like out of thin air. There was one that showed my backyard and it was looking in at me. I was pacing back and forth in the kitchen and there's like a window over the sink overlooking our backyard. We have a big ass backyard. And you can see it's like golden yellow light from the living room. And you can see it's just my shadow. I'm pacing back and forth, right? Nervously pacing, which I really was doing at one point. And then it like pans back out to the backyard and it shows these 3 boys. They look like they're 15, 16 years old. They're dressed in like 40s beatnik attire. If you have any idea what that is, like one of them's got on a striped t-shirt with a little pocket on it, and he's got on these little corduroy shorts. The other one's got on, the other one's kind of fat. So they all 3 were like trickster spirits because they thought this shit was hilarious. The fat one had on like it wasn't a fedora, but I don't know what it was. It was just some type of hat. And so it shows them walking through my backyard, and the one in the middle in the striped shirt has a leash. And guess what's at the end of it? That fucking dog with the red eyes. Keep in mind, that red dog is never not present in any video. Every second of every video, that red dog, he might be in a different form. In one of them, he looked like a gargoyle, like concrete, but he was there. So I know I've wondered myself, like, is this like a protective Hecate thing? Or is this the keeper of these boys? I want to lean towards keeper of these boys. I don't know. But I don't know. Anyway, so it shows them walking through my backyard. And I'm like, oh, fuck. By this point, I've sat under this tree all day, convinced myself that if I take a shower, this thing is going to try to fuck me in the shower. And was like, okay, how do I get this out of here? I'm trying to get on top of this now before it gets any worse. I got the brilliant idea to sage the house because that's what the internet said to do. So I acquired the sage. And when I tell you I almost torched the house because the shit ignited. On God, this sage. And I had to go like kind of out of my way to find this sage. Like it wasn't just, we didn't have a spiritual shop in town then. We do now, but we didn't then. So I had gotten the sage from somebody that I'm very good friends with even today, who is very spiritual. And she was like, yeah, smudge your house with this. The whole fucking thing caught on fire and I just like dropped it because I didn't know what to do with it. And it literally almost torched the house. I was like, oh God. So then I started getting paranoid that, oh, this thing's going to burn the fucking house down. Great. So over the course of the next several days, this is just like an ominous, nefarious vibe, right? I spend my entire days, all of them, under that tree. And my nights, I'm wide awake. And I'm like hell-bent for some reason on proving that this exists. I'm like, I'm going to catch this shit up one way or another. And I'm making myself sound insane without realizing it. So then I had read something about like mixed salt, like sea salt and water, and just like spray around the perimeter of your doors and stuff like that. So I started spraying, and it's just from a small like spray bottle. Actually, it was a mist bottle. I'm spraying, and I notice it's raining. This sounds insane, okay? I know this sounds crazy. It looks like it's raining down the walls of my grandma's bedroom, because I was in her bedroom spraying, and the mirror, and it was like this dirty, like yellowish, like yellow tinted liquid, and it was really thick. There's some still on my bedroom wall that has been painted over, because when we were cleaning it up, it just got messed up. But it was this and it smelled awful. It smelled like sulfur. So eventually I stop as I'm watching just droplets form out of thin air and just start running down the mirrors. And then they start running down the walls, and I'm like, oh shit. So I go and get a towel, and I'm like, I gotta fucking make this stop, because this is gonna very much give away and make me, they're gonna think I did this. And they did. I'm like rushing trying to like dry this shit up and get it off the wall, but the more I'm doing it, like the more it's showing up. Well, my grandpa comes in there, and he's like, what the fuck what are you doing? And I'm like, don't ask. So my grandma comes in there, and she was like, what in the hell have you done? And I'm like, I did not do this. And she's like, well, then who did? There was no argument to be had, because I knew there was nothing I could say that was going to make anybody, well, the demon did it. Because I'm convinced at this point it wasn't even a ghost, it was a demon. My grandma basically is like, what the fuck, without saying fuck. So I was like, you know what, I can't hide this anymore. However, I'm going to put this to her in a gentle way where it doesn't sound totally unhinged. And I downplayed it a lot. I was like, listen, I have a problem. And I explained to her, I think that I have an entity stuck to me. And she was just kind of like, okay. Which I ended up really glad that I did tell her, because I was like, listen, I haven't had a shower in like 4 days. I would really like for you to sit here in the bathroom with me while I get a shower, so that this thing doesn't grape me while I'm in the shower. And she was like, okay. And so when I got out, she was like, do you think maybe it would benefit you to make a doctor's appointment? I was like, absolutely not. It's not that big of a deal, right? So she is now aware that something is up, but I did not tell her the severity of it. And all my other friends at this point were like normal. They weren't on DRUGS or anything like that. They were all just like well-adjusted, normal people. So one of my other best friends calls me, and she was like, I'm coming to get you. You need to get out of the house for a little bit. And I'm pretty sure that she and I are friends on here, and she still uses this app. If she wants to like put her 2 cents in on what she experienced like through me at that point in time, like my behavior and shit, then she's more than welcome to. I don't care. But that's up to her. She comes and gets me, and we go to a bonfire at my other friend's house. And my dad at this time lived with his girlfriend, but he would come and stay the night on Friday nights sometimes, because my kid was already kind of stressing, because that meant, because he was there, which meant I'm gonna have to stay in my bedroom. I can't sit there and stare at Antonio Banderas all night. So I go to this bonfire, and I am calling every, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, asking my father, can you go check my bedroom and make sure it's not on fire, and make sure that like it doesn't look like a tornado's been ran through it? And he's like, well, sure. And like, for some reason, he didn't like think too much of that. To me, that would have been a massive red flag, but he did it. He complied and didn't really ask why. I don't know if my grandma had already told him, and they were just kind of like unsure of how to like deal with it, or just like tiptoeing around it or whatever. I don't know. But that was nice, because I did like have normal conversation, and like the atmosphere at this person's house felt like so light because it wasn't possessed. The only time during this whole thing where I left for like an extended period of time, because I was so paranoid it was going to fuck everything up in the house, and I'd come home and everybody be unalived and all kinds of shit. I mean, you never know. So I go do that, and then I come home, and when I get home, everybody's still awake. So I go in my room, and I sit there and I start looking at the wall. Now, there were also some other shadow figures. Backtrack for a minute. Before, like, we keep our porch light on all the time on the front porch. So, like, before you even went in the house, there was, like, the Antonio Banderas dude, and there was the dog in the corner, great grandpa dog, whatever. And then there was two more that were constant presence, constant ominous presence. They didn't do nothing other than sit there and make you uncomfortable. There was an alien, and I say that because that's just what he looked like. On the front porch, you could see him in like the shadow of I'm looking at the porch light right now, that's what I'm looking at. But he would stand there going like this, just rocking back and forth, right? Watching you go in the house. He was real skinny, and his head was like large and circular, and I just assumed he was an alien. And then as soon as you walked in the door, there's like a little catty corner there between a closet door and the front door. And do you remember back in the 90s when there was like the Marlboro, I can't say that word, commercials, and it was like the little cowboy guy, and he thought he was all cool, and he was just like standing there against the fence with one leg up and like smoking Marlboro Reds. Like he was a cowboy like that. Like he had a hat on, and you could see the piece of straw in his mouth, and he was just a shadow. I mean, he was just a black shadow, but he was standing there. He was real skinny. They were all real skinny, except for that little fat piece of shit. But anyway, he's standing there with his leg up in the corner, just posted up. I got to the point where I just started telling him hi when I came in the door, because at some point I decided if I can't scare them off or whatever, I'm just going to absorb them. But anyway, so I go in my room, and there were a lot of the shadow figures would come and go. When they started to come in, they were faint, and you couldn't tell what the shape was going to be. And this one came in, just like the others, like super, like light gray, and he was from the torso up, and I watched him form himself into what appeared to be a clown. Now, this thing did know my insecurities. It knew my deepest secrets, and it knew my fears and everything. I'll get to that later. But this is like one part of the story that really confuses me, because I've been desensitized to clowns because for some reason, my grandma collected like little ceramic clowns. We have 2 living rooms, one of which we use to like watch TV and shit, and the other one nobody's allowed to sit in. It's like when people come over, my grandma hosts people in there, and she always kept them in like this fancy ass fucking floor to ceiling curio cabinet thing. So like I was never scared of clowns. So it missed the boat with that one. And I was just kind of looking at it like, you're gonna have to do better than that. But anyway, I see the poofy, hair, and it looks like it's got shoulder pads on, and then this button starts, these little buttons, one at a time, 2 little buttons pop through the wall, like from the inside out, in the shape of little circular buttons. I watched them form through the wall. Now, those are still there to this day, and I will show them to you if you give me 1 second. So yeah, basically there's both the buttons. I took my finger and kind of pulled the paint back, because I knew somebody's gonna be like, oh, it's just nails or something. It's not. The other one, I couldn't get it to do like that one, but it's like hollow inside. And before this wall was painted, it was actually wallpapered. So it's not like it's been painted over a bunch of times. And if you look closely here, this is some of the yellow shit that was raining down the wall. Yeah. Anybody has any other realistic reasons why that would exist, feel free to share it with me in a friendly way, not in an asshole way, because to this day, a lot of this shit, that thing like gaslit me into thinking most of this is in my head. I'm still not sure what was real and what wasn't, except for the videos, because I know I couldn't have faked those. But I watched this happen, and basically went and got my grandma, because at this point she was somewhat aware of what was going on. I said, there's no way she doesn't see this. So I went and got her, and I said, hey, can you come here for a minute? I want you to look at something for me. So she comes in my room. Shortly after, here came my grandpa. I said, do you see this on the wall? She didn't say nothing. She didn't say a word. My grandpa was like, I don't see nothing, but he can't see shit anyway. Like, somebody, like my ex-husband comes to my house like every day, and he'll be sitting there in the living room, and my grandpa will be like, who's that? And he's like 5 feet away from him, which his vision was a little bit better back then, but not to where it should be. But she was the one whose opinion I was really like looking for, and she didn't say nothing. So I took them both in the living room, and I showed him Antonio Banderas. I said, do you all see that? My grandpa said, well, it looks like shadow to me. My grandma didn't say nothing. My dad is like, Cassandra, shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. I'm like, okay. So I go and sit there and watch this clown dissipate back off the wall and sit there all night. And a video pops up overnight. Back to how this thing knows my insecurities and shit. It pops up on my phone, and it's like a film reel. Now, again, this thing knows my insecurities. It knows everything about me. I did not know this at the time. However, I do have borderline personality disorder. Part of that is idealizing a person to the point of like limerent objection. And my child's father and I had like an extremely toxic relationship dynamic. I got pregnant when I was 17, and a month after my son was born, he and I abruptly separated, and he jumped immediately into another relationship, which to me was devastating because we have this baby and everything seemed so like good. And at this point, it had been, like I said, he was about a month away from being 5. So it had been 5 years since we had seen him or really even heard from him. I had not only BPD, but postpartum depression for a long fucking time. Now, one thing about borderlines is that we have what's called a favorite person or an FP, and when things, like, we kind of tend to, like, build our reality and everything around one specific person, and when they leave, because the bottom line of BPD is a fear, like, an immense fear of abandonment. When we end up in a situation where we feel abandoned, let's just say it brings out my fucking insanity. It kind of took over everything, and at this point, even though it had been almost 5 years, like, I just wasn't over it yet. I was, like, pissed off and, like, still looking for, like, whatever that retribution was, because I just couldn't believe that he did that. Now, today, he and I are very good friends, excellent platonic friendship. Him and my son, excellent relationship. So over the last few years, that's changed. But another thing about me, my love language is basically aggression, and I've made peace with that. So something that he and I used to do all the time was just like play fight. Like, we'd be in the floor basically like grappling with one another, and that was just something we would do, and we'd like giggle. And so while I didn't know at the time that my specific damage was BPD, I did know my reaction to this was not normal. Like, my reaction to that entire situation, I've always known something's different about me, but didn't have a formal diagnosis for it, actually, until I was in my 30s. So this video pops up. It's like, it looks like a film reel, and it's an actual, like, look at something that did actually happen. It was he and I rolling around on the floor, like fighting, play fighting. And I know that it actually happened because I have pictures. Like, one of my friends was there when this was going on, and she was taking pictures, and I had pictures of this. We were wearing the same outfits. I'm wearing my tie-dye senior shirt. I mean, this was before I even got pregnant. It's showing me this on the phone. I'm watching it. And all of a sudden, the film reel, right as I start to, like, emotionally react, the film reel on screen just, like, catches on fire. Like, not real fire, but, like, it looks like it's on fire. And then here comes those 3 fucking shitheads, and they're giggling and laughing and shit. After that, there was a video of me back at the place where all this began. And I'm in the video, per usual. Everybody else remembers this, but a couple years ago, there was like a Snapchat filter or something that people were using to, like, it was like backlighting, but it was like black and red, and it was real like sultry and seductive looking, and all these chicks were using it to like outline their body or whatever. If you know what I'm talking about, this was kind of like an early version of that. Very sultry. And it's me, and I'm standing there. However, before I had my son, I never weighed a single pound over 110 pounds, really, a day in my life. I was very much not, you know, very big. And that was something at this time, even though I wasn't that much bigger at this time, I was upset because, you know, how it is when you have kids. Things start, like, sagging and gravity is not working like it's supposed to. Now I'm like, I am a fucking super attractive baddie. But back then, I was like, oh God. Hadn't really learned my self-love yet. In this video, it's like an outline of me standing there. And it's all shadowy and dark, and really, it looked really good. I was like, damn. And you can tell it was me because I had my phone in my hand, you know what I mean? Like, it was like me before I got pregnant. And it was like this little nice little outline. Then it started morphing into something that was just like morbidly obese, which was not at all what was going on. Like, I was not anywhere near that big, but it knew that, like, that was my fear at the time. And it showed me what it would look like, and I fucking hated it, and I just slung the goddamn phone, and I was like, I hate y'all motherfuckers. Like, I'm done with you fucking cunts. It's either gonna unalive me, or it's not. And I had figured out, basically, that, like, it couldn't touch me. Like, the orb was the only thing that ever touched me. None of these little assholes did. Like, none of the shadows did. Nothing ever reached out and, like, jump scared me or anything like that. So I was like, it must be some type of, like, rule that they can't actually touch me. They can torture me mentally and emotionally, but they can't actually physically fuck with me. So after everybody went to bed, I went in there and I sat down Indian style right in front of that pile of dog, and I just was like, listen, bitch, we're gonna have a little fucking discussion. I was like, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna fuck off, or I'm gonna unalive myself so that I can become one of you, and then I'm gonna fucking destroy all 3 of you little bitches. Or if for some reason you block me from unaliving myself, I'm gonna figure out who the fuck you are, find your graves, shit on them, all 3 of you fuckers, and then I'm gonna find every single living family member, ancestor that you have left, and I'm going to fucking obliterate these people. And if I do unalive myself, I'm gonna find every ancestor you have that's alive, and I'm gonna do to them what is happening to me right now. Cause fuck y'all. I was like, I don't necessarily mind your ominous presence. However, the 3 little boys have got to fucking go, bitch. You know? And I basically was like, I don't give a fuck. I was like, I have nothing to lose here, because what happens? You put me out of my misery? Because right now, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Because I'm not scared to die. I'm not. Again, BPD. And I was like, I want you to look me in the eyes. I say this too, you motherfucker. Like, that was kind of the conversation that we had. So, my grandma comes in there, and she's like, who are you talking to? And I'm like... And she made me get in my room. So while I'm in my room, this is the most terrifying part of the whole thing. So my grandma sends me into my room because I'm sitting here talking to demons, and she's probably kind of sketched out. But anyway, she goes back to her room, goes back to sleep because it's late, and I had a horrible emotional attachment to my grandparents, like very adolescent. The biggest fight me and my ex-husband ever got in was because I'd made a remark that in a moment of panic that, oh my God, if something happens to my grandparents, that's the end of me. Like, very much emotionally dependent upon them. In bed, and I'm watching this fucking video that just came up, and it's these 3 boys, and at first it looks like a cartoon drawing. They're like surrounding a bed, and there's a figure in the bed. After a few seconds, I realized that this is being drawn as my grandmother. Oh, by the way, that it's like drawn, that it's insinuating they're sucking the life essence out of her. Like, they're all 3 just standing around doing that, and there's like these little lines, squiggly lines, and it's like obviously from her to them. And then all of a sudden, it shifts from my grandmother to another member of our family. So I went in my grandma's room, woke her up. I said, listen, I don't know what else to tell you other than you need to prepare yourself because this particular family member is on their way out of here. Well, she doesn't really react, and she kicks my grandpa out of bed, makes him go sleep on the couch, and she puts me in the bed. So we're laying there, and her bedroom has a skylight. I cannot sleep, obviously. She's not really sleeping either, but I'm in like a fetal position at this point because I'm just like spent, And so I'm looking through the skylight, and I see this dog and its red eyes, and it's forever, like light years away, like forever away. But it's getting closer because the eyes are kind of looking like red spotlights. It's just shining down on me, and I know what's getting ready to happen, so it doesn't really jump scare me. Different story. All of a sudden, it's getting closer and closer, and then it comes crashing down onto the skylight. And I know for a fact that my grandmother felt it because she had her arm around me or whatever, and she jumped. And I watch as this thing stares through me with its little red beamy eyes, and then all of a sudden, it just goes poof, and shoots back up in the air. And from that moment forward, I felt a lot, like just like a boulder was like lifted off of my soul. I just had like PTSD when I woke up in the morning. Everything felt so much like lighter. But my dad had picked me up early, like 9 a.m. that day. Me and him and his girlfriend had went somewhere. I don't even remember where we went, but she is kind of like asking me questions and stuff. And the more I'm answering it, like the less that she likes it. So we get back to my house, and her and my dad kind of linger outside because she's basically telling my dad, like, hey, something's super wrong. And I go in the house, and my grandmother is very much disheveled because that particular family member that I mentioned last night, her sister called and informed her that family member was deceased. Now, this could have been a coincidence because this family member was up there in age. However, there wasn't really any reason for us to think that was going to happen when it did. I don't mean this as bad as it sounds. Like, we knew it was coming, like, eventually, relatively soon, but, like, not then. And then my dad and his girlfriend come in the house, and she had suggested to my dad that they try to talk me into going to the ER. So it doesn't really take much for them to talk me into allowing her to take me to the hospital. My dad, when I was doing triage, she was just looking at me like I was crazy, and they both piss tested me and blood tested me because they just couldn't believe that I was like sober. So the door opens, and this woman walks in who was like a super familiar face to me because I got in a shitload of trouble in high school. At this point, I had been out of school for like 5 years. But I had a truancy issue in my 11th grade year and a bunch of other issues, and so did the friend that I went to this place with. So we both were very familiar with these two ladies. They were basically like put in our school for like people like us with undiagnosed issues. My girlfriend was like, how did her drug test come back? And she opened my chart and she was like, there's nothing. And so she starts asking me questions, and she says, how long have you been hearing auditory hallucinations? And I was like, it's not auditory hallucinations, first off. She was like, I have to call it that. He was like, we think that we want to send you to this place down the road that was like a actual like mental hospital. She did finally transport me there. She had actually like pulled strings for me to even be able to go. And they put me with the people who were DRUG, who had problems with that. So they ended up sedating me, and I was knocked out for like probably the first 2 days. Like, I got up occasionally for them to like give me meds and shit like that. And they've got me in this room with this lady whose chest area is so large that like when she would stretch up, like her NIPPLES would be hanging out from underneath of her shirt, and I'm like, oh my god. Very nice woman, but I just remember that about her. They ended up moving me though to a room with this girl who, her and her boyfriend had robbed a pharmacy. And when they went to court, he had told them that basically she acted under duress. So I was in there with her, and she and I like clicked immediately. However, they started sending me to like arts and crafts and shit like that. And I was like, I'm not going down there and making macaroni murals. Absolutely not. At some point became like really combative about it because they were trying to make me go to a large group therapy. Not going to happen. And then a smaller, like 5 or 6 people group therapy. Definitely not going to happen. Finally, they basically told me like, hey, you're going. And they brought this dude in there. I guess he was going to rough me up if I didn't. I don't know. But they made me go to this little group with 5 or 6 people. Everybody's in a circle, and they ask everybody to tell their name and why they were there, which I thought was really intrusive because it's none of these people's goddamn business why I'm here, right? Around to this girl who looks like she might be like around my age at the time, which was very much sharing very explicit details of how she unalived her children, but she unalived them in the shower, and we're sitting here just listening to like this horrid details that really do not need repeated ever, much less spoken. Well, they get around to me and I'm like, I don't have nothing to say. Like, the only reason I'm in this circle right now is because I was forced to be. So they were like, well, what's your name? And I was like, Cassie. And they were like, so why are you here, Cassie? I was like, I don't think that's any of these people's motherfucking business. Well, they have all of our charts, and basically she just sat there and read off my chart, like, whatever it said about seeing ghosts and shit. So this girl who unalived her children had the audacity to say, what a crazy fucking bitch. I thought I was fucking crazy. And I just sat there and bit my tongue until that therapist had set down the clipboard that we had to sign our names on when we came in, and the little pencil about that big that went with it. And the second that I got the opportunity, I grabbed that fucking pencil and charged at this girl. And fucking this dude that was in the corner, long story short, puts me in a straitjacket momentarily and then dumps me in a fucking padded room. So I spent the next 2 days in that padded room. That's the last thing I remember before I went home. Now, when my dad came to get me, I know I was traumatized because I was like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, that's the first thing I said, right? Went home with 10 different prescriptions, literally felt like I wasn't real. Ended up going to my friend's house and staying the night a couple nights after I got home. And my ex-husband came and stayed with me, and I made him check every corner of the room before I would go to sleep. Which, at this psychiatric hospital, they diagnosed me with some rare offshoot of schizophrenia. There's a good chance that I do have a lot of comorbidities, and I might have a slight touch of schizophrenia, but I know that those videos that other people saw were real. The rest of it, I don't know. But back then, I quit taking my meds maybe a month after I got home, and some of that shit I was supposed to be on for the rest of my life. But I did quit because I just couldn't handle feeling like I didn't exist and like I'm just like a zombie, you know? But yeah, luckily it went away. But that was like my own personal literal hell.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So my stitches don't work, but anyways, me and my sister, we grew up in a very haunted house. We have things happen to us to this day all the time. I'm pretty sure, at least I do, have something attached to me from that house. But anyways, it started off when we were probably 11 to 13 years old. I'm older. And she calls for me from her room, and our rooms are right next to each other. And she's like, Jessica, come here. And I'm like, what do you want? I go in there, and she's like, something just pulled the blanket off of my bed. And I was like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm sure. And I was like, okay, sure it wasn't like the cat or the dog, or it didn't just fall off. She's like, no, I know what happened. She's like, it got pulled off of my bed. And I was like, okay. And I hang out with her for a little bit, and I was like, it's probably nothing. The next night she calls for me again. She's like, Jessica, it happened again. And I went in her room, and I was like, are you sure it's not just like a coincidence? Like, trying to rationalize it. And she's like, no, like it got pulled off of me like twice now, like in the same night. I was like, okay. We told our parents, they didn't do anything, thought it was our imagination being kids. And so a couple nights later she calls for me again. I'm like, no. I was like, you can come in my room. She's like, no, there's a bug on my, she didn't say it happened again, but she was like, Jessica, come here. And I was like, no. And she's like, there's a bug in my room. So I went in there. She's like, there's no bug. And I was like, okay, why'd you lie to me? I was on the other side of the room, and I ran, jumped on her bed, and was like, I'm freaking out, like, why did you lie to me? And she's like, because I'm scared, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I don't either. Like, I think we should just ignore it. Don't give it any attention. And at this point, it did happen to me once or twice, but I held onto my blanket and didn't let it pull it off of me, and it stopped after a couple minutes. And I think to her, it was happening while she's asleep, and she was waking up to watching it get, like, pulled off the rest of the way to the floor. And after like a few more times of it happening, she calls me one night. She's like, Jessica, come here. And I'm like, no, you can come here. And she finally runs to my room. The light on my room is on, and we try going to sleep in my room. Have a twin-size bed, so we're cuddling, both facing the wall, and I had the blanket over us, and I was holding on to the blanket, and something tried pulling the blanket off of me for a good 2 minutes straight, just tugging on it, kind of hard too. And it finally stopped, and after it stopped, I felt a hand press on my back, like very firmly. I think maybe a little bit after that, a couple minutes, I told my sister, I was like, something just fucking touched me. And so we sat up and like, what do? We can't sleep like this. We're tired. Like, we've got school to go to in the mornings, and our parents didn't really believe us. And we're like, we gotta tell mom and dad again. Like, I don't know what else to do. And so we're waiting, like, because my dad would always come into the kitchen to make a drink, and my room was kind of over the kitchen, so we could hear when he went into it. And so we waited, and we heard my dad go into the kitchen. And so I was like, you sure you want to do this? And she's like, yeah. And so she bolts off my bed and runs to my door, which was open, and she like stops, like stops dead out of a run, and just like stops and freezes there for like a minute almost. I'm like, Jordan, what are you doing? And she didn't answer me, and I thought she was like contemplating it, but she told me that when she ran, there's a giant like obsidian black shadow figure like stopping her from going out of my room. And she couldn't see through it, and like she was just frozen, like scared shitless. And after however long, she finally snapped out of it because she heard my dad make some noise in the kitchen, and she ran down and she was like, something like he's pulling the blankets off of us still, and like, touch Jessica. And my mom finally came up, and she's like, I'm tired of you guys being scared. Like, I didn't think it was this serious at first. And so we did a prayer, and after the prayer, we finally didn't have any of the blankets get pulled off of us anymore. But we still had other stuff happen, unfortunately.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go.
Okay, so this, I cannot make sense of it. It still bugs me. It freaks me out. It's just super weird. But I was 18 when this happened, and at the time I was living with my ex-boyfriend in an apartment in town. And I was working night shift at a nursing home, and this night I was working, and it was probably about 2:30 in the morning, and my boyfriend, he calls me, and he's like, hey, there's something weird going on. I was like, okay, like, what's going on? He's like, there's something in our room. And we've both been very, like, sensitive to supernatural, so it was kind of normal at this apartment at this point. He's like, there's something weird, like, it's sitting at the end of our bed. I was like, tell me, like, explain better. And he's like, well, there's a man in a rocking chair in our room, and we don't have a rocking chair in our room. And he's like, it's just sitting on this rocking chair staring at me and smiling. He's like, it's just smiling, like, it's a big smile, like, unnaturally big, and, like, just super wide eyes, not even blinking or anything. And I was like, well, is it doing anything? Like, is it just staring at you or what? And he's like, well, it's trying to talk to me, but it's in a language I don't understand. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. I was like, you should just try to ignore it, and maybe it'll go away. And so I told him I had to leave and go do something at work. So I called him back maybe 10 minutes later. So when I called him back, I was like, is this still going on? And he was like, yeah, like, he's still there, but I don't think he's that bad. Like, he's like been laughing and joking with me, and like, just he's kind of funny, you know? I was like, no, I don't know funny spirits. That's weird. And I asked him, I was like, what's he joking about anyways? And he's like, well, I don't think you'd really understand. Like, I don't remember the jokes exactly verbatim. I was like, okay. I was like, has he said anything else? He's like, well, he's been trying to ask me about you, but I don't know how to answer these questions. I was like, well, don't answer them, first of all. And I was like, what questions, though? And he's like, well, he's asking where you're from. And I only told him that you're not from the state. I was like, okay. Well, ask it where it came from. And it said it came from a portal that was on the same road as our apartment. I was like, okay, that's still super weird. And then I asked my boyfriend, I was like, well, ask it where it came from before the portal. And so at this point, my boyfriend's the middleman, and I'm talking to the spirit through him while I'm at work on the phone for maybe 10 more minutes. And it was asking me where I got and learned my, like, abilities from, like mediumship, and stuff about my old house that it's just weird. Like, I was like, how do you know this stuff about me? Like, why are you asking me these things? And it would laugh at me, and it would not answer my questions. And so I was like, okay, well, this is going on too long. Like, it's just mocking me at this point. It's not answering my questions, and it's asking me very personal questions. And so at this point, it was like, it like clicked in my head. I was like, hey, like, I asked my boyfriend, I was like, how do you understand what it's saying if it's not speaking English, right? And he was like, oh my God. He's like, I didn't even realize. He's like, I don't know. I was like, is it speaking English now or what? He's like, no. He's like, it's definitely still speaking the other language, but he's like, I can understand it though. I was like, that is weird, and that is probably not good. I told him, I was like, well, we should definitely stop talking to it. We'll try to do something about it when I get home. And so I told him, like, just ignore it, don't talk to it anymore. I was like, this thing is weird. And so I told him, like, I have to go for work anyways. Just text me if you need anything. And so he texted me a few more times throughout the night, and this man, I call him the smiling man, he got up and he was standing over my boyfriend while he was trying to sleep, just like
staring over him next to the bed, just staring at him, watching him try to sleep. And he's brave because he did go to sleep like that. I think he maybe went away. But the next morning I get home and I was like, I don't know what we should do. Should we go get like blessed or anything? And I ended up saging the house. And when I saged the house, I did a couple other things, but the activity there didn't really stop. But the weird smiling man didn't come in our house. Like, that place was so creepy. Like, my mom would never come inside the house, like the apartment. We had shadow figures, sleep paralysis, things moving, things getting lost. Just bad luck overall. And when I moved out, I finally asked my landlord, I was like, or I told him about it, I guess. I was like, there's something weird with that apartment. We had this and this and this happen, you know. And he was like, that's really weird that you say that, because that's the only apartment out of all of the ones that he owns that he could not keep a tenant in. They would always leave early or they would not stay. And so I guess he got exorcised and blessed and all that stuff because he was very religious. And I don't think I've had an experience with that hat man since. But I just think it's super weird. Like, I don't understand why he was asking me these questions or how he knew these questions. But anyways, that is my freaky story.